Okay, I'd like to welcome you all to the regular board meeting for San Mateo County Board of Supervisors for Tuesday, July 9th. And will you now join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? Madam Clerk, will you roll call, please?
Supervisor Pine. Excuse me. Supervisor Groom. Present. Supervisor Slocum. Supervisor Tissier.
Here.
President Horsley.
It's time for public comment. We have one speaker for public comment. It is Martin Fox.
Good morning, President Horsley, members of the board, and my fellow veterans. Thank you for your service to the residents of San Mateo County. Please give some hope to family members of persons living with mental illness who lack the insight needed to seek treatment by voting to implement Laura's Law and pulling agenda item number 43, the $23.4 million so-called Mental Health Services Act plan for FY 2013-14 from the consent agenda. Laura's Law is a positive outcome producing procedure that creates a treatment compliance behavioral situation which is certified to be effective, efficient, and economical by the United States Department of Justice. Policies and procedures that limit mental health treatment to only those persons living with mental illness who have the capacity to understand their need to volunteer for treatment condemns those who believe that they are not sick to a life of senseless pain and suffering by diverting resources away from positive outcome producing treatment and to failures like the half-service partnerships and San Francisco's $1.2 million PrEP program mentioned on pages 1851 and 58 of the plan. Laura's Law creates a treatment compliance behavioral situation that reflects the assumption of responsibility for public health and safety, like the supervisors of Yolo County did when they voted to implement Laura's Law 2 weeks ago. Ineffective, expensive, and inhumane programs like half-service partnerships and PrEP are the result of intellectually and morally bankrupt policies and procedures that distract attention from treatment resistance solutions with false promises. There is no unfettered right to control one's treatment when an illness or disease endangers public health and safety. It is dangerous, expensive, and inhumane to evade the duty to mitigate the threat of untreated mental illness. Please give some hope to family members of persons living with mental illness who lack the insight needed to seek treatment voluntarily and vote to implement Laura's Law. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fox. It's now time to set the agenda and to approve the consent agenda items. I'm going to actually move one to regular agenda, that's number 19, and move to continue item number 15.
I would like to move 20 to the regular agenda.
I wonder if we could also move 63 to the regular agenda, just because it sort of complements number 19.
Okay. Maybe we'll take those both at the same time, 63 and 19.
Okay. With that, I'll move to set the agenda and approve the rest of the consent agenda items.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Now time for presentations. The presentation of a proclamation designating July 2013 as Cancer Prevention Month, encouraging citizens to participate in the Cancer Prevention Study 3. I think, as we all know, the cancer prevention is extremely important at Cancer Prevention Month. It's important to recognize that. In 2013, over 1.6 million people will be diagnosed with cancer in the United States. And of that amount, about 3,500 of those people will be from San Mateo County. So the American Cancer Society is looking for participants for a long-term cancer prevention study. The goals are to better understand factors such as lifestyle, environmental, genetic that can help prevent cancer. And ultimately, the goal is to ultimately eliminate cancer as a major health concern for future generations. This is the fourth large-scale prospective epidemiological study that the American Cancer Society has conducted over the past 70 years. And, past studies have really been very successful. For example, they were able to prove that tobacco is in fact hazardous to health. Nutrition and exercise really also affect your risk for cancer. So these studies have resulted in new strategies, environmental protection, and cancer treatments that really have saved millions of lives. So I'd like I'll make a motion to approve this proclamation for Cancer Prevention Month.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. So accepting the proclamation are Vicki Paul, the Cancer Prevention Study 3 lead volunteer, and Nancy Gronin. She's another CPS 3 volunteer. I have to say, if you've looked at your local newspaper today, they're actually seeking to get volunteers for this study. So with that, Vicki and Nancy. Yes, you get to speak, please.
Good morning, and thank you, President Horsley, for this lovely proclamation. We really appreciate it. My name is Vicki Paul. I'm a 20-plus year American Cancer Society volunteer. I'm a 7-year breast cancer survivor. And I also know a couple of you from a decade on the IHSS Advisory Committee. So I appreciate the opportunity to come here. President Horsley has told you a lot about the study. I want to make it a little more personal. This is a study, as stated, that's linked tobacco to cigarettes, to cancer. I say that every time I make this speech. In the 1950s. This study continues today. It also was responsible for a lot of the legislation on secondhand smoke. That was the second part of the study, CPS 2. And as stated, CPS 3 hopes to find a cure and produce a cancer-free generation. I don't know how we could argue with that. What we're asking of all of you today is to join the study. We are looking for 300,000 people. In San Mateo County, we need 500. So if each of you bring 5 friends, we got it. Okay? Just that's all we're asking. You and 5 friends. To qualify for the study, you must fill out a survey online, or they can be provided paper. You make an appointment at a site in San Mateo to come and fill out a shorter study. You have to give us a little bit of blood, just a little bit, 7 teaspoons. That's then sent to Atlanta within 24 hours and kept cryogenically, only identified by your number. In San Mateo County, we have 5 sites and 7 different dates for you to make an appointment to come and join the study. You get a waist measurement, a short study, you donate a little bit of blood, and you're done. In 2 years, you'll get another study by email or snail mail, and you'll get one every 2 years. We're asking for a 20-year commitment, 20 to 30 years. That's what makes this study different. That's what makes it so important. There are flyers in the back if you didn't get any today. They list all of the appointment sites. The website to go to is cps3bayarea.org. Please go. Please bring your friends. The study parameters are you have to be between 30 and 65 years old and never diagnosed with cancer. We want to see what happens to you in the next 20 to 30 years and how the environment affects that. You can have had a small squamous cell skin or basal cell skin cancer, but no other cancers. So needless to say, one of the first questions I get when I make this speech, which I have made many times in the last year, is, you can't join the study, which I can't. I'm a cancer survivor. What are you doing volunteering for this? Well, we didn't bring the PowerPoint, but I like to end things with a bang. So I tell people, I do my Vanna, and up pops a picture of my 2 grandchildren as they're dressed in wedding attire for my son's wedding, walking down the aisle with a vineyard in the background. I say, this is why I do it. I want my grandchildren to have the opportunity and the possibility to see a cancer-free generation. When my grandson graduates from St. Mary's College and has to decide what kind of doctor he wants to be, he's 20 years old now, I don't want oncology to be a choice. I don't want us to continue to need oncologists. That's why I do it. That's my call to action for you. I want you and 5 of your friends.
So here I am standing before you because of cancer research. I am a 17-year cancer survivor. The cancer was in my lymph nodes, but I took the challenge that I'm asking you to take today, and I did a clinical trial. If I didn't do the clinical trial, I would not be standing here with my feet on the ground. They would be in the ground. So I encourage and further emphasize what Vicki has said, to go ahead and go to the website, sign up, make the appointment. It's vital to further research in cancer and go for that cure. Thank you so much.
I thank both of you. That's a really important study. So, actually, it's kind of actually a moving story. So in any case, the next item is item number 2. It's a resolution authorizing fiscal year 2012-13 appropriation transfer request in the amount of $6,807,495. Jean Fraser?
Good
Welcome.
morning. I am here with some unfortunate news. This is a large ATR, which is essentially dealing with a preliminary audit finding from one of the divisions within the health system. As you know, for many years, should I keep going? Or you?
Go ahead.
Okay. As you know, for many years, the health system was responsible for providing mental health services for children in special education in our local schools. That responsibility transferred to the schools in 2011, but we have claims to the state going all the way back to 2002 to be paid for the services that we rendered to these children. Unfortunately, the state, as in many programs that are run in the health system and paid for by the state is very far behind in doing audits. So they just came in this year, in January, to do an audit of our claims in this program for 4 years, from fiscal year 06-07 up through fiscal year 09-10. Our total claim for those years to the state was about $12 million, and the preliminary audit findings disallowed the vast majority of those findings. About $2 million of that audit disallowance, and again, I want to stress this is preliminary, and we will be and are in the process of arguing with the auditors over much of it. About $2 million of those findings are related to duplicate claims, other errors in the claims that we would typically expect, and that in fact we had discounted our accrual of the revenue for those types of errors in claims. The majority, about $1 million of the claim or the audit disallowance, relates to issues that we just vehemently disagree with them, and we will be contesting those. Unfortunately, the vast majority of the audit disallowance relates to a new interpretation of state regulations that disallows payments for a very specific service that we and frankly every other county did provide to children in special education, and this is social skills training. This is a very important component of the services, but about a year or two ago, the state decided that, in fact, in its interpretation of the regulations, this was not something that could be paid for. The problem is, of course, they made this decision many years after we'd actually provided those services. Santa Clara was one of the first counties to have this audit. They have fought this issue all the way through the Commission on State Mandates, but unfortunately the Commission did rule against Santa Clara, and therefore we expect will rule against us, and the state is now applying that change in interpretation retroactively and disallowing $4 million in services that we did provide, legitimately provide, and they acknowledge we provide. They just believe that we should not be paid for them. What we are doing right now is, because it's year end and we need to present our financial statements fairly, we are discounting or reducing our accrual for this claim. We are doing our best to estimate what we think the actual ultimate disallowance will be, and we believe it will be in the range of $4.5 million to approximately $7 million. So we've chosen $6.5 million as a very conservative number that should take care of all the issues, even if some of the issues that we believe we should win on, for some reason, we do not win on. I am pleased to report that we were able to handle this all within the health system. I want to thank the leaders of the divisions who, when we reported this issue to them, all came together, and every single division within the health system is contributing out of its reserves or out of its operational savings to help BHRS, who only had $3.5 million in reserves. So we made up the difference from within other divisions, and I'm very pleased with the response by the division leaders, understanding that, unfortunately, given that 80% of our funding does not come from the county, this frankly could happen to almost any division, given especially the state's attitude now towards these kinds of programs. So we do not expect the final decision on the audit to occur until sometime next year. We really appreciate the assistance of the controller in responding to this audit. And we believe that with this ATR, we should have taken care of any of the findings from that audit. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Supervisor Tessier?
Just one quick question. Have we talked with our local representatives about this issue?
We have not. I will say that the way these are typically handled is they go up through the commission. So it's essentially litigated, you won't say through the courts, but through the Commission on State Mandates, and there's a very long opinion on this. Honestly, the bigger issue, they haven't paid us for years on any of this. So I'd rather get paid something. So we're carrying a very large accrual for many years from the state.
I guess the part that disturbs me the most is the retroactivity, especially when you provide the service. They didn't say anything about it during the time you were providing the services, and to be able to go back in time. And I just wonder if maybe, they change the rules midstream, maybe we get legislation that changes it back. I mean, I don't think we let it go. I realize we want some money back, but I also think these kind of things, if they do it here, we've had other times, we've gone up to the state, Rich Gordon helped us get $8 million back. Okay. So, I just think that's another avenue. While you fight it this way, I think we may have to look at, could there be some legislation that doesn't allow the state to keep doing this to counties, because it's very detrimental to our funding for healthcare.
That would be fabulous. We'll pursue that with Mary and Connie. That's a great idea. Hadn't thought of that.
Supervisor Pine?
Yes. This is really unfortunate. The retroactivity is a big problem. And also the point you emphasized that social skill training is critically important. And on that topic, you emphasized that Santa Clara fought it through the whatever the state mandate panel. But I wonder if that's appealable, into the district court. I wonder if it might make sense for John Byers to talk to his counterpart in Santa Clara, because again, intuitively, it seems like it would be a difficult position to take. And obviously, the state mandate board would prefer to find that things aren't reimbursable. But intuitively, you wonder how they reach that opinion. So that'd be a suggestion. And then the other comment I might make is, now in the new regime, the money goes to the schools, and most of them now contract with us. And I guess they may face this same problem now.
I actually don't know the answer. Steve, do you know, is this a state mandate also for the schools, or is it? It's actually technically a federal mandate, and I believe the reason it was a state mandate was because it was transferred to BHRS. So I'm not sure it's actually a so to speak, just from a legal perspective, a state mandate on the schools. It's actually a federal mandate.
Yeah, it kind of maybe.
But we will certainly talk to the schools
that might be a
about
little
it.
interesting legal analysis in that many of these services are provided under IEPs.
Right.
And those are given great deference and priority by school districts by law. So in some respects, what the state has done here is taken money away from actually legally required services under an IEP. If this was agreed to by the IEP plan, there was a legal obligation to provide it. And so, I don't know, legally it just doesn't sit right with me.
Okay.
Any other comments? There's one speaker on this is Martin Fox.
Thank you very much again for your service to San Mateo County. The $9.4 million in lost revenue over 4 years, including 1 quarter yet to be audited, is additional evidence of policies and procedures that reflect the health system's confusion of hope with reality. Just like the $3 million in lost drug reimbursements that we dealt with 2 years ago. Prior planning prevents poor performance, so does self-audits. The health system's recommendation ignores its budget calls for nearly doubling the size of health administration from 13 to 23 positions, increasing the number of BHRS positions by 11, and increasing BHRS's budget by almost $5 million, but does nothing to implement policies and procedures that address the claims duplication, incorrect rates, and rule misinterpretations, which resulted in another multi-million-dollar loss. Public health policies and procedures that reflect the health system's continued confusion of hope with reality run up against the inconvenient truth that produces bad outcomes, including the suicide that took place in Marin County Jail less than 3 weeks ago, 2 homicides that took place in Optos a week ago Sunday, and the death that took place in Oakland last night as the result of untreated mental illness. The Department of Justice certified Laura's Law as an effective and efficient hospitalization and incarceration recidivism reduction program. Please vote to implement Laura's Law and stop allowing the health system to confuse hope with reality.
Okay, we need a motion for the resolution.
I'd like to make
Go
a
ahead.
brief comment to Mr. Fox. Mr. Fox, you come to all our meetings, and we're happy to hear from you, and you remind us about Laura's Law at each meeting on typically a couple of occasions. But it's not productive to your cause, and it's completely inappropriate to attack our staff the way that you just did here and have done on other occasions. So I really urge you, for the benefit of your own advocacy and just because of the respect that we have for our staff, and that's not a helpful.
Supervisor Grimm?
I was going to say the same thing.
Okay. Any other comments? So I need a resolution or a motion for the resolution.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Okay.
And if I may, just a quick comment to
Yes.
follow up on Supervisor Pine's comments about some potential legal issues. I have not had a conversation with Jean Fraser directly about the audit, but as she was speaking, a number of issues were coming to mind for me that I will be exploring with the health department. I suspect, although I haven't talked to Jean directly, that her staff has been interfacing with my staff on this audit. But that notwithstanding, I do plan on sitting down with Jean and her staff and sort of exploring some possibilities. So I will do that.
Thank you, Mr. Byers. Next is the county manager, the Measure A report backs, school safety.
Mr. President, members of the board, before we begin the Measure A report backs, I've asked Beverly Beasley Johnson to come to the board meeting today to give the board a brief update of the county's response to the horrific fire that we had in Redwood City on Sunday and our continuing response with respect to that.
Okay.
Excuse me. Good morning, President Horsley, members of the board, Mr. Maltby, Mr. Holland, and Mr. Byers. I'd like to take this opportunity to update the board about the fire that took place in Redwood City and what the county and our partner agencies' response has been to our residents who are in great need. On Sunday morning, as you know, around 2 a.m., Redwood City firefighters responded to a 6-alarm fire. This complex is a 72-unit building that was home to 97 residents. I received my call from County OES requesting assistance to set up shelter at 7 a.m. on Sunday and to serve the displaced residents in conjunction with the Red Cross. and staff at our Fair Oaks Center. Working with OES and the Red Cross, permission was received from the state, and we opened the emergency shelter at the Redwood City National Guard Armory on Volota Road. That shelter was able to be opened by noon on Sunday. About 40 to 50 residents, between 40 and 50, were transported from the Fair Oaks Community Center to the shelter on Sunday. Unfortunately, many of the fire victims are among our most vulnerable population in the community, including residents with mental health issues, many seniors that are medically fragile, and low-income families who rely on Section 8 vouchers to provide them housing assistance. The presence of the county will be required long-term for a variety of issues, including, and most pressing, transitional housing. This population does not and is not doing well in a shelter environment. HSA staff, and I'm sure other county staff, will be on scene and provide support as long as necessary. We're concentrating our efforts addressing emergency needs such as food and shelter. We have psychosocial workers who are partnered with BHRS, with the health system, and the Red Cross to address mental health services, and we're helping, the health system is helping to obtain medication for the various medical needs of residents on site. Some of the residents are active HSA clients receiving Medi-Cal, CalFresh, and CalWorks, and we have benefit analysts on site trying to see and assess other who are impacted for other kinds of benefits that may be available through our agency. We'd like to also note the great National Guard facilities support provided by Master Sergeant McLeod and Sergeant First Class Gonzalez, who have been on scene and been very helpful to this effort. The response to the fire has been a collective partnership with many county staff, including the housing department, as many residents are receiving housing assistance, BHRS for mental health services, adult and aging who have IHSS clients and are serving seniors at the facility. At this point, we're moving today into a service connect or a service center model that will individually assess the needs of each individual resident and develop a plan of action for each individual who has been impacted. We're also working closely with community partners such as North Fair Oaks Community Center, Salvation Army, and Envision Shelter Network. We will continue to provide updates to the county manager's office throughout the week and as the effort continues. On one positive note, I was at the shelter at 8 o'clock this morning, and a gentleman announced that today was his 80th birthday. And so he will be celebrating, and though he's in a very difficult situation, he remains hopeful for his future. And so thank you to the county manager's office and the board for your continuing support in this effort.
Thank you. This is actually the second major fire that we've had in fairly recent times. I know Supervisor Warren Slocum and I were talking about this, and we don't know if it's related to arson, do we? Yet.
We do not.
So we should really monitor that.
We'll keep the board apprised both of our relief efforts as well as the actual cause of the fire.
It was actually a pretty bad weekend for last weekend with the plane crash, and then that was really a terrible fire. It was looked like it was going for about 20 hours. So,
Could I just say a couple words?
yes, please.
Thank you. Last night, there was an emergency town hall meeting at the Armory that Beverly Beasley Johnson and her staff were at, along with the Red Cross and the National Guard and partner agencies. I was invited to come down and say a few words to the 70 or so folks that were there, and it was really a moving experience in that some of the people told me they had lost everything. And so if you think about it, how do you go pick up your mail? How do you get the keys to your car, and so forth and so on? But I wanted to compliment you and everybody associated with that effort, because I was just really amazed at the coordination and the good job and the thoroughness of getting people medications for diabetes, for instance, yesterday. It's an amazing story. The county should be very proud of what it's done. And of course, our hearts go out to those folks that, lost everything. I understand there was one fatality, I think, which is truly unfortunate. But as I told the folks last night, the county is here for them and working hard, and you're to be commended. The Red Cross, I think, is doing an amazing job. The health system, the Sergeant Major of the National Guard was pretty amazing in his flexibility. And I just wanted you to know that one of the things, as you know, that came up last night were the fire department told those residents, some of the residents can go back today, this morning, for 10 minutes, go into their apartment and get essentials like maybe a cell phone or wallet or whatever. And for a lot of those folks, 10 minutes wasn't going to be enough time to get in and get out. Obviously, the fire department was concerned about hotspots still because it was a major blaze. But I want you to know that last night I talked to the mayor of Redwood City, who talked to the city manager and the fire chief, and it looks like the fire department is going to be a little more flexible with the 10 minutes, and they're actually, I think, going to give assistance to those folks that need assistance going up the stairs and down the stairs with their belongings. So I think that's a compliment to Redwood City and its leadership and participation in all of this for those residents. So thank you for your leadership.
And
It's
thank you for
appreciated.
your advocacy. Thank you very much.
Okay. So now, going to school safety.
Yes, Mr. President, members of the board, we have three Measure A report backs this morning. The first report back is on school safety, and we are recommending the addition of 2 deputy sheriffs as school resource officers to augment the existing resource officers in the program. We think that this is consistent with the outcomes from the summit that was recently held on school safety for children in the aftermath of the events in Connecticut, and would recommend your approval.
Okay. Any comments or questions?
A couple questions,
Yes.
if I could.
Supervisor Slocum?
Just curious about the Fair Oaks School, for instance, which is in North Fair Oaks. I understand is now going to have a charter school at that location, which means that that school will be more than just a neighborhood school, and that means that more traffic will be coming, parking will be a bigger issue, and so forth and so on. And I'm curious if is it the community policing officers or the CHP? Who is it exactly that handles those traffic matters around schools, especially Fair Oaks, in that North Fair Oaks area?
I would certainly defer to the sheriff department if they want to comment on this. Typically, those are handled by local law enforcement. As you know, with respect to unincorporated area roads, there's a relationship with the CHP that doesn't exist with cities, but typically in terms of handling traffic around immediate schools, crossing guards, that sort of thing, that's typically, I would think the sheriff's department would be involved in that, but we also have the former sheriff here that may want to comment on that.
We also have Captain Gallagher. Would you want to comment? And Captain Mike
There's
from
the
CHP.
Good morning. Yes, also Captain Mike Maskerich from the Highway Patrol is here. We both deal with the traffic issues in the unincorporated areas, and we have a great partnership. Typically, with the Sheriff's Office, we'll handle all the traffic issues related immediately to the campus area and trying to get parents into the school and parents out of the school in a safe manner. We also do some traffic enforcement around there for speeders and things like that. But the Highway Patrol is consistently out there monitoring that type of traffic in the unincorporated areas. And I don't know if Mike wanted to add to that at all, if you had any further questions or if that helps.
As Captain Gallagher stated, we have a great relationship with our partners in the Sheriff's Department. And we also put out our senior volunteers to assist. They're part of the Highway Patrol. They're not paid, but they assist with traffic control responsibilities, getting the children in and out of the immediate area, working in conjunction with the school resource officers, as well as if we identify that there's a particular problem, then we can put marked units there to address whether it's speeding, unsafe turning movements, whatever the case might be, and again, working in collaboration with the Sheriff's Department. So we're fully prepared to be able to address those issues with the North Fair Oaks School and the addition of the charter school in that area.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
I just had one question. I noticed the SROs are in several of the cities and also a lot of the unincorporated areas. I noticed there's nothing that I see here in the North County. I'm sort of curious, I think of the large cities like Daly City, South City, have they just not participated?
Those cities that have their own police departments, typically, particularly the larger ones, have school resource officers. This just addresses those cities that the sheriff contracts with and those schools in the unincorporated area of the county.
Okay, so the new money for the new SROs or for this new program will still be for those cities and unincorporated, it won't extend?
That's
Okay.
correct. That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Just have one other question. The sheriff's department may, in the relatively near future, perhaps, contract with the city of Pacifica. So I'd like to make sure that if that in fact happens, that there be some consideration for the city of Pacifica for SROs as well. And we'll point out that they actually have more high schools than Woodside, Portola Valley, Millbrae, San Carlos put together. They have twice as many. In fact, they have 2. So, Supervisor Pine.
I'm
Sometimes laugh at my own jokes too. So.
That's because nobody else will.
If you laugh, we'll laugh.
Okay.
In my experience serving on the San Mateo High School District Board, I found the school resource officers to be incredibly helpful in those instances they were provided by the cities. I had a couple of questions and an idea. In reading through the memo, the individuals we're hiring are part of the community policing unit. And today we have 5 deputies and 1 sergeant in that unit. And they do a lot of things. They do the SAL youth diversion program, the so-called the community alliance to revitalize our neighborhood, and the SRO work. So today, how much time are these deputies actually able to do the SRO work? Because it's they have a broad kind of set of duties here.
Sure. So their primary responsibility is at the schools, and then ancillary duties would be with the SAL program and the CARE-ON program. For instance, right now the school is out of session, so
right.
they're spending a lot more time. But we consistently keep our children engaged that are out there on the streets. This past week we had an event where we had all the neighborhood kids come out, and it's actually a really neat event where we shut down a whole block within the neighborhood, and literally we roll in there with our lights going on, shut down the streets, put these blow up jump houses for the kids to come on out. We feed them healthy snacks and drinks and engage with the youth out there to make sure that we keep our bond together between the kids that are going to the school during their summer vacation time, and then we just kind of pick up again when school starts. So during when school is out of session, or sometimes after hours at community meetings and things like that, that's how we utilize them.
Okay, that's helpful.
Yeah.
And then in looking at the list of schools, there's a number of schools on the list. By my count, about 14 or 15 are actually private schools. And it wasn't clear to me, are we providing any support to those schools, or that was confusing to me.
We provide support to those schools on a couple of different levels. If they want us to provide the DARE program and school education programs, we go in there. But what's also important is that we're trying to keep them all on the same safety response program, which we're developing countywide right now with all the cities in an effort to make sure we respond to emergencies the same way. So what we found in initial engagements with the private schools are they were not on the same page as our public schools. Matter of fact, our public schools weren't even necessarily on the same page. And by engaging with all of them together and for evacuations and emergency drills, we know that when our deputies respond to a private school and a public school, we're going to handle everything the same way. So that's why we ensure that. And then, just as a side note, a lot of these private schools are elementary schools and middle school, and then it's not uncommon for them to go on to public school afterwards. So we've already built up that rapport with them in a private school, and then they move on to public high school.
Yeah, and also looking at the list of schools, I mean, there's 3 comprehensive high schools, big high schools, and 5 middle schools. And would it be accurate to say that the SROs spend more, substantial time at those, because a lot of the schools are just K-5, and
Right.
you might do a drug presentation, but I can't imagine you're actually on those campuses very much.
Well, it varies. It depends on what the climate is at the school, and that's what helps out. The school resource officer will go to the schools, stay in touch with the teachers, stay in touch with the students, and kind of build their schedule around that. Sometimes they'll alter their schedule to spend more time at a certain school just based on what's going on in activities. Has there been something that causes concern with parents, and should they, spend more time on that campus? So it's kind of pretty fluid with the amount of time they're spending.
Okay, well, thanks for that background. And then I also had an idea for the county manager's consideration. I wonder if it might be possible to hire, retired police officers into these positions, or at least take a look at it. It seems to me that maybe a school resource officer is really a little different job than a full-fledged deputy sheriff that, has a beat. So, I don't know, if it would work or not, but maybe it might be an extra help category, because I just think, again, it might be something that we could look at a little bit.
Through the board, I'm sure that the sheriff looks at all the deputies in the sheriff's department as a pool of deputies to be assigned and called upon for any duties as needed. But with respect to these two positions, I'm clearly retired peace officers could perform those duties. And we have a couple of months before we bring this back to the board. So let me explore that issue with the sheriff and see, as a pilot program, if this may lend itself to that sort of staffing, and we'll make a recommendation during the final budget hearing to the board when you consider all measure items.
Thank you.
Well, actually, I think they already do hire retired peace officers for other things, usually courts and transportation. But in any case, it's fine to explore that. Can you talk a little bit about some of the activities that you do with the kids in the SAL program, especially the fields that you have? You do a lot of soccer programs and street hockey and.
So the primary focus for the SAL program is to basically make sure that the kids are safe between the time they leave school and the time they get home, or their parents get home. We're in a time where both parents are working, or the single parent families, and we use the SAL program basically to keep the kids occupied. There's a variety of things that we do. We have a very robust soccer program throughout the entire county, the schools that we serve. We have a hockey program. We have computer education. We do reading workshops with the kids. There's, we do this thing that I just described, play streets, where we go out to the kids and just get them all engaging with each other for after-school programs.
And you actually are embarking on a program to improve fields, as I understand it. And I look at some of the fields that I've seen. There's so many gopher holes that so one of the kids don't break their ankles. So what are you doing? What's the department doing about school fields? Are you working with schools?
We have worked with schools, and then also with working with outside community persons to help try to maintain the fields and get the fields built up to a safer standard for kids to play on.
I know that through the CMO's office that we have in the past helped with some of the schools. I think Fairland View and I think Fair Oak School. So I'd like you to take a look and see if there's something that we could do with some of these fields that the captain is describing as well.
Okay.
Okay.
Be happy to do that. And just a comment too on the SAL program. I've had the opportunity to observe several of them, and I always come away very impressed with the interaction between our deputies and the kids. And I know in several instances, I know Don probably is aware of this too, there are the children that have been involved in SAL and PAL programs that have become deputy sheriffs. And I have to believe that part of the reason for that is they were exposed to law enforcement and all of the wonderful things they do, and have chosen to make a career out of it. So there's a lot of benefits for the community for that program.
I think it goes a long way to preventing future crime. Supervisor Pine?
Just one comment on your inquiry about the fields. Just coincidentally, this weekend when I was doing Take a Hike, there was a member of the SAL team, and she mentioned that they are organizing to do some fundraising around field work, and they seemed like they were going to be could be pretty substantial.
Yeah. Okay.
Mr. President, could I just make one
Yes.
comment? Mr. Maltby, when you look into that matter of the fields, Some of the parents in that area have spoken with me about the fact that some of the schools in North Fair Oaks where there's a soccer field have restrooms for the kids to use, and some don't. And I can't tell you right now which ones do and don't, but I understand some are like a porta potty situation, and at least one that I know of is a concrete sort of facility, more permanent.
Freestanding from the school itself.
Freestanding from the school itself. And I think part of the problem with I happened to take a tour of soccer fields, but those porta potties, I think the problem is maintenance and cleanliness for the kids, and nobody wants to use them because they're so filthy. But I think the bigger issue is just, it seems like we could look at restrooms for all those fields, so that things are consistent down there and the kids have, and parents have clean, well-lighted facilities to use.
There, in the Fair Oaks area, two of the schools are in the unincorporated area and two are in the city of Redwood City. And a number of years ago, there was a joint powers agreement between the county, the city of Redwood City, and the Redwood City Elementary School District to improve all those fields and to actively maintain them. And I'm not sure restrooms were ever part of that, and I think probably it's time, given your comment and Supervisor Horsley's comment, to revisit that. And revitalize that agreement, and this time to include facilities for restroom use.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Captain Gallagher. Good to see you. If there's only one speaker, Barton Fox, and I hope, Martin, that you have taken Supervisor Pine's admonition to heart.
Thank you, President Horsley. I've tried to avoid discussing anything but policies and procedures, and avoid the confrontations that I've been confronted with in the back of this very room in February. The good news about the school safety measure A report back is that armed law enforcement will be employed to fight crime. The bad news is that it ignores the fact that former students living with untreated serious mental illness were shooters in Tucson, Aurora, Newtown, and Santa Monica. Lora's Law is a positive outcome-producing procedure that creates a treatment compliance behavioral situation which is certified to be effective, efficient, and economical by the United States Department of Justice. Our health system's policies and procedures, and you'll see that in my testimony regularly, promotes universal victimhood and rejection of responsibility for producing negative outcomes. And that makes implementation of Lora's Law a rational response to the events in Tucson, Aurora, Newtown, and Santa Monica. Please vote to implement Lora's Law like the Yolo County Board of Supervisors did just 2 weeks ago. Thank you.
Okay, so that concludes any testimony on school safety. What is the pleasure of the board?
I'll move it. Oh, go ahead.
Move it to September?
Okay, move it to September.
Second. With those
All in
other
favor?
additions that the county manager was going to look into.
Okay, and then we have a second from Supervisor Groom. All in favor? Aye. Aye. Okay. Next one is B, prevention and early intervention for at-risk children.
Mr. President, members of the board, this is a comprehensive recommendation regarding programs for children that are really on the cusp of entering our mental health system, but have not yet risen to that level. The board charged us early on as we took a look at Measure A funds to try to identify the gaps in the system. And this was clearly a real gap. And then as we looked at it in the context of the school shootings in Connecticut, and thinking about what are the ways that we can try to make our schools safer. Clearly, while it's important to respond to those with mental illness and to provide treatment and a full range of services, if you could interact and intervene in many of those conditions early on, to identify them and diagnose them early on, to get appropriate treatment resources to those families early on, many of these horrific outcomes that have become all too familiar can be avoided. And so we asked the probation department, the behavioral health and health services, and our human services agency to collaborate on a proposal that would have all of the elements that would be necessary to provide early intervention, prevention, and treatment for children throughout their early ages, and this proposal, we believe, does that. It's comprehensive. This is a chart before you that is a little bit complicated, but nevertheless, it's clear that we want this to involve the entire community. We want it to involve the parents so that parents know what to look for and what the resources are available in the community for children that may have mental disorders. We want teachers who are our front line of defenders, if you will, who see these children 6-7 hours a day in our schools. And if they observe problems, to be able to identify those problems and then identify and know that there are resources available and get those children to the resources. We have family resource centers on schools already, and to augment the resources of those centers that can assist with the identification and ensure that children that are in treatment, that are attending schools, have those resources are available to them. And then obviously, importantly, the treatment arm in behavioral health services to provide services to children. It involves our Pre-to-3 program and the partner services that we have for moms that are expecting and those that have young children, so that we give the children the appropriate start in life and the resources that they need in order to have a successful early years from a health and behavioral health standpoint. And of course, it goes through all of the range of services that we have, including psychiatric emergency and outpatient services and so on. But the comprehensive nature of the proposal, the emphasis on prevention and early intervention, I believe all of these are things that will play big dividends in long term to community and to public safety. And I think the price of this is really minimal in terms of the long term payoffs. You know, what's the price of avoiding a new town? And these types of programs, I think, can do it. So I want to thank all of those that are involved, particularly Steve Kaplan and Loch Nguyen for heading this up. I think you've done a great job, and I think this puts us off to a great start.
Adrian.
Yes, I just want to add a little bit to that, in that we did start this a little bit earlier before we had the task force and before we had the summit. But I have to say, since that time, we've also engaged our education partners, Superintendent Ann Campbell, Nancy McGee, and a lot of others in our task force meetings to take a look at what was brought forward by SISOC and tried to tweak it to be sure that we're really connecting those from the classroom to those resources that are going to be needed. And I know this does seem confusing, and I actually had asked that we have something like this to make it even more confusing for everybody. But what I wanted to show is we have to make sure there is a connection. And right now, from discussions I've had with some in the school arena, there's been somewhat of a disconnect between the classroom and the actual resources. And this really shows that there is a path to make sure that these children get the help when they need it. We also know that this is not absolutely perfect. I mean, we're going to continue with the task force. We're going to continue to tweak this. We're going to make sure and see what works and what doesn't work. But the real component here, besides just talking about prevention and early intervention, is making sure that teachers, parents, and even students recognize problems within the classroom. And, you know, that's not always the case. And part of this has a good element of education for all those groups to make sure that they really can recognize when someone may need some attention. And we want to get away from stigma and things like that. We want to just make sure that these children get the the help they need very early, because as John mentioned, you don't want to wait till they're 18 to 24 years old, because those are the ones you hear about that are shooting up in the campuses, but where were they when they were, 6, 8, 10? So we believe that this will hopefully prevent some of those things from happening. You can never prevent everything, but there's a lot of children that just need maybe that little extra lift that they just aren't getting, but the teachers see it. So I think this is very comprehensive. I think Steve's done a great job, along with the rest of the health partners and all the partners that were mentioned by John, and also with the education community. And we're just going to continue to work very closely and make sure it really works, and we'll hopefully have some report outs as to the successes and measurements of what's being done and how well it's working. So I do want to thank all those partners.
Thank you.
Supervisor Slocum?
Thank you. I just wondered if we have any data on the projections for bipolar disorders, for instance, depression disorders, for instance. Are there any numbers surrounding that? I'm assuming it's on a wild uptick, but are there numbers?
I'm going to ask Steve or Locke to comment on that.
Good morning. Thanks for your question. I wouldn't say that the prevalence of bipolar disorder or depression are on the uptick. I think the percentages are pretty constant. We have proposed in here to add to our early psychosis and treatment program a bipolar component to identify young people early who are manifesting those symptoms to intervene. But and bipolar disorder is a major mental illness, considered major mental illness, and pretty much in any population, 1 to 3% of the population will be diagnosed with a serious mental illness. So we're not experiencing necessarily an uptick. I think part of what's happening is a more acute ability to recognize people who are struggling with those disorders. And so I think we have a greater awareness of that, but I don't think the data would suggest a higher prevalence.
Thank you. Just one quick thing to follow up. Supervisor Tissier mentioned the stigma of mental disorders, and I'm wondering if you could just talk for a moment about what you're doing or what we're doing in terms of that stigma that gets attached to.
Sure. So work around stigma has been a major effort, I'd say, for the last 5 years, and there's a number of really significant things that both our county's been doing as well as our partnership with the state. At the state level, there's a joint powers authority called Cal MHSA, and we're a member of that joint powers authority, and they're developing and implementing statewide materials and campaigns around issues of stigma. Some of you may have seen a documentary that was on PBS at the end of May that was produced by Cal Mesa. Glenn Close was the narrator, and she was sharing her story of her sister who has, I think, a bipolar disorder. Locally, we have a number of things that we do throughout the year. We have 7 what we call strategic initiatives reaching out in various communities in the county to specifically address issues of stigma that play out similarly but differently in many communities, and trying to get people to understand that mental illness is something that is in every community and needs to be recognized and addressed. I'll give you one example. A few years ago, we had these same groups produce videos around how stigma plays out in their specific communities. So we had folks from the Filipino community and the Chinese community, and they actually created these little vignettes of how their communities and families discuss these issues and some of the challenges. We've reproduced those CDs, and we've been training people throughout the county as facilitators to start having conversations using these DVDs as kind of a stimulus for discussion, but to start to engage community members in their communities. Another example is we've been working with the Filipino consulate, and we've trained, Supervisor Tissier was talking about helping people identify mental health issues earlier. We've trained the Filipino consulate in this youth mental health first aid, which is a evidence-based practice, and that's helped tremendously to start a conversation within the Filipino community. about mental illness and what that means in their community and how we can recognize people. So those are just a sample, but this is an ongoing effort of our division in the health system.
Thank you.
Don't go. As I understand it, by recognizing the first episode of a child becoming or suffering from bipolar disorder, that you have a pretty good chance of avoiding some of the really more serious episodic incidents later on. Can you do the same thing with schizophrenia?
Well, actually, we have a program in this county that is a replication of a program that started in San Francisco. It's now in Alameda, and there's other versions of this program throughout the state. It's based on a research that was done in Australia to identify young people, particularly that are either showing symptoms that would lead some folks to believe that unless there is an early intervention, they're going to have a psychotic episode, or people that have had a recent psychotic break. And there's a very intensive intervention that's occurring with those people to help put their psychosis in remission, essentially. And the initial research on this coming out of San Francisco and some of these other places is very positive about keeping young people in school, keeping them connected to their families, and avoiding, as you know, in your days as sheriff, some of the tragic consequences of untreated psychosis, particularly when people have had numerous hospitalizations and psychotic episodes. So they're starting a new program for bipolar disorder. We've included this in this Measure A. We think young people that are developing bipolar disorder symptoms are a particularly high-risk group of people that if we can intervene early, I think we can achieve those same outcomes.
Any other, Supervisor Pine?
Thank you. A couple of thoughts and questions. First, the importance of this work is, it is indeed critical. I think even if we didn't have a Sandy Hook situation, this type of investment will just pay big dividends for us, since it's early intervention, trying to identify kids that otherwise might run into trouble later. And I really like the fact that we're getting the various departments in the schools and the law enforcement all collaborating through this, how we're saying it, SISOC. This is SISOC system. And I think one challenge will be, communicating with the 23 school districts. I mean, that is a big undertaking. So I'm really pleased to see we've hired this, or we'll be hiring this coordinator. But even, with the coordinator, I'm sure the team will prioritize in some way, because there's like 110 schools, and we're not going to do this everywhere. And then also, maybe at a later time when the team has kind of more of a detailed plan, it'd be interesting to see how we're kind of allocating monies against the various elements of the plan. I mean, a while back, we received a memo on some of these topics, and there were budget numbers or estimated, and I don't know if those have changed, or again, I would think it'd be interesting to see at some point, again, how we're allocating the money. Like, I thought for, kind of contrasting the memo, the North Fair Oaks memo, which I thought gave you a lot of kind of granular detail about where the money was going. At some point, I think it'd be helpful to see that.
I think it is in here.
Right here.
Yeah, we have allocated per each item a budget.
Okay, then I have egg on my face. There, and I will therefore stop talking.
Supervisor Ann Campbell's in the audience. Would you like to speak on this issue at all, or?
Well, Superintendent's coming. I also want to just thank the partners that worked on this. There was really an incredible amount of work, and SISOC historically has not included the County Office of Education. So this has stimulated that, and so as we go forward, we look forward to having County Office of Ed representative in SISOC. Nancy McGee has been fabulous from Ann's staff and really helped shape many of the things that needed to go in here. And Locke was fabulous, and Christine Villanos from probation as well. So I really appreciate the great cooperation we've had with this proposal.
Good morning. I appreciate the opportunity to just share a few reflections with you. The last year, I think, has been a really important year in terms of cultivating partnerships among different agencies in San Mateo County, and certainly between the County Office of Education and our school districts and BHRS and the Board of Supervisors. The partnerships that have been developed and I know will be sustained are extremely important. I have to say, from someone who was once a school counselor, I very, very much support the work that Steve Kaplan and Locke are doing to really bring this kind of intervention to our school sites. I think Supervisor Tissier, you are absolutely correct. If we can get to students when they are so much younger than when they're in the latter stages of adolescence and really acting out in very violent ways, the better off we are. So we really, from the County Office of Education, and I know on behalf of the 23 superintendents of our school districts, we are very much in support of this, and we certainly appreciate the work of the Board of Supervisors and the various county agencies involved with this. So thank you very much.
And thank you, Superintendent Campbell. I have three speakers, actually four. Martin, I'm not going to call you up, Martin Fox. I will let you speak at the end of the meeting for both of the items. So the first speaker is Dr. Faye McNair Knox, followed by Reverend Mary Frazier.
Good morning, President Horsley and Supervisors Slocum, TCA, Pine, and Groom. It's a privilege for me to be a part of the Voices lauding this development of comprehensive collaborative services that are prevention and early intervention in nature for those individuals who are dealing with trauma and other issues that may turn into mental health crises. I represent the East Palo Alto Behavioral Health Advisory Group, and we've partnered with Behavioral Health and Recovery Services and have a small piece in this comprehensive effort, which we're very excited about because East Palo Alto deals with trauma and mental health issues and dual diagnosis issues all the time. And so we're very excited that we have been able to carve a partnership within a partnership of our police department, Ravenswood City School District, and the Behavioral Health Advisory Group. So along with all of the components that this initiative will bring about within EPA, there will be an effort to bring those three pieces together, and the community piece will be invited onto school campuses to support what the school-based programs will be doing, which is very exciting, and the children should see the bridging and coming together of all of these important elements. I just wanted to read a statement that our new superintendent of Ravenswood City School District is sending in support of this initiative. She says this communication is in very strong support of the Measure A funding proposal submitted by the East Palo Alto Behavioral Health Advisory Group. This much-needed project would support the students in the Ravenswood City School District and their families in addressing the impact of violent events. Should I stop? Okay. She talks about the three main points of the project and ends by saying the school district personnel very much look forward to working with the advisory group and the other partners to bring better communication services and interventions stemming from trauma to affected students and families within the community. Thank you for your consideration of this critical and much needed collaborative project. Dr. Gloria Hernandez, Superintendent, Ravenswood City School District. Thank you very much.
And thank you as well. Thank you. Reverend Mary Frazier, followed by Gloria Flores Garcia.
Good morning, President Horsley, members of the board, and Mr. Malby, and Mr. Byers, and Mr. Holland. And I'm just excited. I'm excited because of the consideration that you all are giving to our project. And I say our project because it's a community project in terms of us all being better prepared and enabling our students to be able to cope with situations that they're not accustomed to. And so I want to just speak about the community component. I want to bring to your attention the importance of having community involved with the educational system as well as law enforcement. And the fact that years back, during desegregation of Sequoia District, I was privileged to be the liaison to Woodside High School and East Palo Alto. And we tried this very concept there and found it to be very helpful. When there was tension on the campus or tension on other campuses, we recruited community leaders to come in and just be presence, to do the ministry of presence so that students would feel comfortable. And we need to do that with our younger children because of their experiences with brothers and sisters and friends being killed and maimed and wounded. And so these young people need to know that the community is a part of the educational system and that we do care about them. And when these things happen, we can actually be helpful to the teachers and administrators. And so I'm just excited that we have an opportunity to participate in this. I'm a member of the Behavioral Health Advisory Group in East Palo Alto, and so thank you for your time.
Thank you, Reverend Fraser. And Gloria Flores Garcia.
Good morning, and Honorable President, members of the board, county managers, and council. We thank you for your consideration of this project by the East Palo Alto Behavioral Health Advisory Group. What is being done with these funds is addressing the needs in East Palo Alto that is long overdue. For some years now, we have worked together to address critical issues affecting this community. With these funds, we are addressing the future of our children and youth as it relates to the outcomes of violence. Our plan is to deliver this three-pronged approach that will involve critical entities that will come together to improve necessary communication linkages amongst those that serve and those that need service, all stakeholders. The creation of on-campus support structures necessary to change the outcomes of whole families affected, and the implementation of longer-term follow-up supports and interventions so that healthy living and learning continue throughout the lifespan of individuals and families and not be short-lived because of violent incidents. Again, thank you for your kind consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Garcia. Okay, so.
One more question, Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yes.
Could we hear a little bit more about the Family Resource Centers? I'm just not that familiar with them, and it's a big part of the undertaking.
Perhaps Loch Nguyen could come forward to talk a little bit about that. We have existing family resource centers on a number of campuses and had for many years, in which we have provided mental health, social, and public health services to families in connection with schools. And one of the reasons that we originally established those is we've found from years of experience, one of the universally safe places in a community is often regarded as a school site. Mm-hmm. And having those services linked to a school site, particularly for many of the populations that we serve, tended to make them more accessible. And I'll stop there and have Locke chat about it.
Through the President, Supervisor Pine. The Family Resource Centers have actually been around since 1992 and is a model where we have psych social workers and others who are working closely with the community. Our current version right now has 7 of these Family Resource Centers, 5 in the Redwood City School District, 1 in Bayshore, and 1 at Sequoia High School. And we have psych social workers there who are integrated with the team over there. The Redwood City School model has community schools where we're part of the many aspects of this. This particular aspect, we are proposing to have, to work closely with 5 of our core agencies. That would be North Peninsula Neighborhood Services, Pacifica Resource Center, Samaritan House, Emergency Services Partnership, and Puente de la Sur to cover approximately about 22, at least 22 of these elementary schools. I'm going to ask our manager over the FRCs, Natasha Bermanese, to talk a little bit about the services that are particularly provided, as well as what we hope to provide as well.
Good morning. So in terms of the Family Resource Centers for this proposal, what we're looking at is placing psychosocial workers as well as other human service agency staff in our core service agencies. And the reason why we looked at that is it allows us to be flexible and not choose a specific school to focus on, but look at a number of different schools and meet those needs as we can be flexible. It also enables us to serve the 0 to 5 population of the needy families that come into a core service agency looking for CalFresh benefits, medical benefits, and other services that we can link and make sure that on top of that they get mental health services, groups that they can participate in, parenting, and other aspects that can be supported. So we've had that model and tried that before, and it was really successful for families because we felt like we could serve a large number of people and really link all the support services together into one. So medical, again, food benefits, and then mental health services.
That's really helpful. Thank you.
Thanks.
Any comments?
I have one, just
Yes.
indulge me for a moment,
Yes.
just one last question. Could you, Mr. Maltby, could you help me understand how the dollar amounts that are on the attachment 1, I think it is, were determined?
Each component of the program was costed, and where there were funds to be leveraged, we did that, as the board had instructed us to do, and that's listed as well. But each, the process was we tried to identify where we felt the needs and gaps were, what types of services were necessary to fill those needs and gaps, then cost specifically the components of that.
Okay.
Thank you.
What's the pleasure of the board for this item?
Mr. President?
Yes.
I would like to move that we send this to September, but I'd also like to make a couple of comments.
Sure.
Today we've received this report about very serious issues. We've offered up a considerable amount of money to go to work on these as a start. These recommendations were made by highly professional members of the county staff, the county education staff, the county probation staff. They have measures to them, and they're to enhance mostly children's physical and mental health in our community. But I want to note that none of the recommendations that have come from this group recommend a passage of Laura's Law. Instead, it recommends a very defined set of jobs and tasks that we're going to do in this county. About a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago, when we had many comments from public speakers about Laura's Law, not being an expert on that, I decided to go and investigate it for myself. I met with Louise Rogers, I met with Steve Kaplan, I met with Melissa Platt, I met with the sheriff, and I met with Judge Forkham, all who have had extensive experience in our county on mental health issues. Every one of them told me that they thought that the programs that we had in place, while perhaps not as enough and perhaps not as well funded as they should be, addressed many of the needs in our community and did not feel that Laura's Law in any way enhanced or would be as effective or as adequate as the programs that we have. So today, again, as we're about to approve these amount of dollars, this is what the finest professional minds in our county have recommended to us. And I'm pleased to recommend that we move this to September, because I think that we have a good track record in this county through our conservatorship program, through our not-for-profit network that delivers most of our mental health services, that we have done a good job. We can always do better. We can always refund those programs, and that's what we're doing today. So I just wanted to make those comments and recommend that we move this forward.
Thank you, Supervisor Groom.
I'll second that.
All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, thank you. I might point out that we actually will have one more hearing on mental health, mostly for adults, that will deal with Laura's Law Light. And I really appreciate what you've said. That's, I think is very accurate. The next item is North Fair Oaks Community Plan and Implementation.
Mr. President, members of the board, as the board is aware, you have previously approved a plan for the North Fair Oaks neighborhood. And Measure A has given us the first real opportunity to put some substantial funds toward the implementation of that plan. In the development of these recommendations before you, we've certainly worked with Supervisor Slocum's office to identify and prioritize those elements of the plan that we are beginning work on. I would emphasize that this is the beginning, not the end. It's a long journey that will take us through many years in order to really return the vitality of the North Fair Oaks neighborhood to a very important area of our community, and also to recognize that we really share the Fair Oaks neighborhood with the city of Redwood City, and that we intend to partner with them all along the way, so that at the end of the day, from the community standpoint, it doesn't make any difference whether you live in the unincorporated area or the city of Redwood City. In the North Fair Oaks neighborhood, you will see many changes in the years to come.
Any comments from the board? Supervisor Slocum, did you want to make any comments? That's your district.
Thank you. I appreciate you looking out for me. The memo talks about the fact that the board could move certain of these items to a higher priority if there was an interest in doing that. And I think that's on page, well, there's no page numbers, but this particular item I'm interested in is large-scale improvements to stormwater systems in North Fair Oaks. As you know, North Fair Oaks, most winters floods. That's an issue, and I'm just wondering if we can somehow give a little more attention to working with Redwood City and other agencies on this stormwater and flooding problem.
Certainly can. What we can do between now and your September budget hearings is I'll ask Mr. Porter to weigh in on that particular aspect of the improvements. And as you know, one of the real problems in the North Fair Oaks neighborhood is that the drainage goes out to a single point, and at certain tidal conditions, it makes drainage very difficult. So it's been a source, I know, of great concern to the residents as well as to the public works staff. But we can certainly comment and see if we could put some numbers on something that could begin to address that problem.
Thank you. A couple more things, if I could. Sure. Is there any timetable to the public lands working with the county on parks in North Fair Oaks, besides the one that you listed in the memo? No more information on that. Okay. The whole. Let me say that I appreciate the work that's gone into this, and Mr. Eggemeyer and Mr. Porter. Thank you for the efforts, and your staffs also in putting this all together. In terms of the communications part of the recommendation, it calls for some amount of money for a communications plan, strategy, and so forth and so on. And being a new supervisor, I'm not really familiar with this territory, but the question is, how does my office play, let's just call it a lead role or a heightened awareness kind of role in the whole outreach and communication with that constituency in North Fair Oaks as these plans unfold?
Through the president to Supervisor Slocum, we would see the communication plan being developed through the County Public Information Office in conjunction with your office, and so that when that plan is developed, you would certainly have the opportunity to comment, to shape it, to weigh in on what our thinking is, and we in turn would be informed by what you're thinking in terms of the community needs are with respect to the outreach, and then it would be executed by that office.
Thank you. Do I have time for just a couple more points, or would you like me to
No, that's fine. You
adhere to the 2-minute limit?
Take as much time as you like.
Thank you. One of the issues that's been around for a very long time is the illegal dumping in North Fair Oaks mattresses, sofas, and so forth and so on. And while we've made progress, I think, in that area, it's still an issue. And there is a sensitive matter that I just want to bring up, which is the proposal calls for illegal dumping signs in North Fair Oaks. But I would like to see us install some camera there as a pilot project to see if that actually could help deter illegal dumping in that area. I know we put some cameras in East Palo Alto for hazard dumping, and so it would be that same idea. That is to say, maybe we capture the license plate of the perpetrator, and maybe that notification on those signs that it's being filmed helps deter dumping. So I'm wondering if the cameras can be a part of that whole signage issue.
Yeah, we could certainly do that as part of this package.
Thank you. One of the statements in I think the write-up says that Middlefield Road has the highest incidence of pedestrian and bike accidents in the county. And these improvements are some number of years down the road. And I'm wondering, I guess the CHP officer, Mike, left, but is a representative from the sheriff's office here. I'm wondering if between now and then there aren't steps that could be taken to try to reduce that number of pedestrian and bicycle accidents, because it's going to take a couple of years at least for the undergrounding and the road diet and so forth and so on.
I could comment on some of the things that we're doing throughout the county, and I might be incorrect on the acronym, but I believe it's called the STEP program, where we've utilized neighboring agencies to all come together, and we actually do a sting operation on crosswalks. And it's been very successful in reducing the number of accidents. And basically, we send officers in plain clothes walking back and forth in the crosswalk with literally the last operation we had was about 20 officers in the wings. And as people blew right by them, we were stopping them, advising them, mainly citing them. But we have done an increased presence at the crosswalk, especially during the school hours. And a lot of it is education with people that, hey, this is, unsafe speeds. But I cannot speak as far as if that's the highest number of pedestrian and bicycle accidents on Middlefield Road. I don't have that information in front of me.
Thank you. Just one last thing.
Sure.
Just again, Mr. Eggemeyer and Mr. Porter's department have a lot of work in front of them with just talking with them the other day in a meeting about the undergrounding of the power poles for North Fair Oaks. And just seems like an incredible effort that's going on now, but will increase as we go through time. And I'm just wondering if in September during the budget hearings, if we couldn't have some information or report back perhaps on the whole notion of the possibility of additional staff being needed in planning and public works to really accommodate the rollout of this plan and all the work that is going to go on there.
Through the President, Supervisor Slocum, Mr. Porter and I have already had this conversation as part of our budget discussions, and you will see recommendations in the budget that will come before you in September with respect to project management, so that we can, in fact, meet the targets that the board's setting for us.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Slocum. Yes,
I wanted to ask a question about enforcement. Is because we hear lots, not just in North Fair Oaks, but we hear a lot of other not enough enforcement officials. Is that something that you're going to consider also, beefing up the enforcement division?
We have had that discussion with respect to the code enforcement. I believe that I'm going to have to get back to you on that. I forget whether we have recommended one additional person or not, but we have had that discussion.
I think especially if we're going to call out the dumping here, we need, in addition to cameras, we need some human beings.
Right.
Thank you.
Supervisor Pine?
I'd like to second points made by both Supervisor Groom and Slocum. On the code enforcement, I think that would be something to take a good look at. I mean, we've, I think we all appreciate that, there are a lot of compliance issues in North Fair Oaks. And if we can kind of take care of what we have, that's as important as building new. And then also on the issue of the flooding, Supervisor Slocum and I have had some discussions about that. I've started to learn some about it through my work on the San Francisco Creek JPA, where we are potentially looking at some bay levees, and everything is interrelated. And one thing that's really quite sobering is we don't have any money in the county for flood control. For example, our San Francisco Creek, our flood control district overlying the San Francisco Creek has a grand total of $200,000. And San Bruno Channel similarly has a couple $100,000. With the exception of the Colma Creek, we really have no resources compared to the Silicon Valley Water District, which just did a $600 million parcel tax. So, longer range, I guess it's really a little bit of a tangent, but we're going to have to put our heads together and think about how to deal with flood control, not only in North Fair Oaks, but throughout the county, because we don't have a funding mechanism. But the area in North Fair Oaks is critical. And unfortunately, there is somewhat of a disconnect between the governing entities that we have to build collaboration there. And then a quick question for the county manager. When we think about financing this work, particularly the actual construction, I mean, what is would we bond any of this? Would we consider a benefit assessment district to pay maybe a small fraction? Obviously there's limits to what you could raise locally, but oftentimes, when downtowns do improvements, they have benefit assessment districts. You try to get a little skin in the game from the merchants. So I don't know I'd just be curious your thoughts on whether everything's gonna be funded through Measure A dollars, or whether other mechanisms might be appropriate.
Through the president to Supervisor Pine, obviously the first phase we're recommending county dollars that are before you in Measure A. Going forward, we will look at other funding mechanisms, benefit assessment districts. I will say as an aside that benefit assessment districts have been difficult in the Fair Oaks area, primarily because so many of the businesses are the property is owned by absentee landowners. And if it were up to the businesses, I'm sure that the assessment would be approved, but that's made it difficult. Doesn't mean it can't be done, but it takes a lot more time and a lot more outreach in order to get everybody to the table and to agree on the nature of the improvements.
Thank you.
Supervisor Tessier?
Yes, one of the things I'm obviously pleased to see is that some of the first installment of some of the Middlefield Road funds will go towards the South County Health Clinic. And I do want to also say, we've worked very closely with Samtrans and Caltrain, looking at that whole area. In fact, Caltrain has already put some fencing around that area. They were quite surprised to see, that entranceway and how unprotected it was. So they've already gone out and done that at their own expense. We've also talked with them about potential bus stops so people don't have to cross the street. So there's a lot of work going into that. It's a very difficult intersection there where the clinic is. And so I'm glad that we're putting some money in for some signalization and things like that. And I do know, I've been in contact with PG&E, and I think I haven't been able to get back to Jim Porter, but there's a lot of undergrounding, a lot of work that PG&E has talked about doing in that area. And I think we just need to continue to work more closely and make sure a lot of that can get done sooner than later, because it really will clean up the area significantly. But I do appreciate that will get done. I guess maybe the question I have is, when you say first installment, this clinic's supposed to open this year, and this first installment, will that be before this opens, do you think, or kind of in conjunction with?
Ask Mr. Porter to, there he is.
Thank you. Through the president. The first installment is going to look at the traffic signals at Middlefield Road at the clinic and try to get those signals in advance of the undergrounding. The tricky part on this is the undergrounding is going to involve modifying where sidewalks are in the roadway width, and we got to make sure that the poles are placed in the right place because we can't pick them up and move them. So that is actually, we've got a traffic engineering firm right now analyzing traffic patterns projected from the South Clinic on Middlefield so that we can get a sense for the best ways to handle the traffic signal and the pedestrian traffic across Middlefield. And based on the findings of that study, we'll then be able to site signal poles and design a signal in advance of the undergrounding. Because the undergrounding is going to take a significant amount of time. It's not only working with PG&E, but there's two other utilities involved. There's telephone and there's cable television. And the real tough part about undergrounding is you have to coordinate the work of all three utilities when you bring down those poles. And that tends to take an inordinate amount of time.
I think the other thing we might, and we're actually already meeting, so this is probably, it's coming up in the next month or so. The other part is to be sure as we coordinate the signals and where they're located that we make sure we work with Samtrans for the bus stops and all. So that's, I mean, there's a group that's working on that already, but we just need to be sure that we get that all coordinated prior to doing this as well, so. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Porter. Just have one speaker on this, Debbie Torres.
Hello. I just came today just to support Supervisor Slocum and recommend the Measure A funds for North Fair Oaks. It just seems to me like North Fair Oaks has been neglected for a long time. And, you know, when I heard you speak about North Fair Oaks seamlessly, you know, going together with Redwood City, I mean, that would be like a dream. You know, I'm not quite sure why, you know, we haven't gotten the attention that we need, you know, but, and I appreciate all of the talk about the undergrounding of wires and stuff, but Middlefield Road really needs a complete redo, something along the level of perhaps Burlingame Avenue project. And I think that the money that they're asking for is not enough. I think it's time for North Fair Oaks. I think everybody needs to get behind this project. I mean, we're looking at a 30-year plan. And again, you know, there's, you know, muse why. Why doesn't this area get the attention it needs? I mean, everybody knows there's a lot of undocumented people living in North Fair Oaks. But if this is a 30-year plan, God willing, in 30 years, these people will be documented. And we need to look towards the future and how they're going to be able to get good jobs and good paying jobs and want a higher level of life. So let's plan for that. Let's plan for North Fair Oaks and give it lots of money to do lots of good things.
Thank
Okay?
you.
Thank
Ms.
you.
Torres. Oh, thank you.
That's all I wanted to say.
Thanks. Supervisor Slocum, would you like to?
I would like to make a motion to move this item forward to September.
I'd like to. I was going to second it, but, okay, seconded. All in favor? Aye. Okay. I'm going to take the liberty of moving items number 19 and 63 next. Mr. DeMeo and Mr. Golden have been sitting here very patiently. So we, I'm going to do one other thing. I'm going to take a 5-minute break. So everybody has to be back here at 11:15.
Yeah, I wasn't realize that.
Okay, we'll begin again. So item number 19 is a resolution authorizing a lease concession agreement with Mountain West Aviation. Mr. Porter?
Thank you, President Horsley, members of the board, Mr. Holland, Mr. Maltby, and Mr. Byers. The Department of Public Works, who operates San Carlos Airport, in conjunction with Real Property Division of the County Manager's Office, sought proposals for a suite office space, essentially, at the San Carlos Airport. We received 5 proposals, and after reviewing the proposals, we found that Mountain West Aviation was the provider of choice that was the best fit for the airport. Mountain West also has the ability to provide a fuel service in addition to the services that they would provide at our terminal building. The next item, one of the constructions items that was removed from consent item 63 relates to a project that we have at the airport to relocate our existing fuel farm area, our fuel farm, which is in a safety area near the runways, to a location outside of that area. So when we move to a new area, we have the potential of expanding for another provider, and Mountain West can provide that service. So we're recommending that this lease be approved and that Mountain West be a lease entered into with Mountain West for that space, as well as the new space for the fuel farm. Thank you.
Questions on the part of the board? Supervisor Groom?
And the new fuel farm will include unleaded gas.
I may defer to our airport staff, but at this point, if the provider chooses to provide unleaded gas, then they can certainly provide it. At this point, there is no certified unleaded gas, and I'm looking at our airport staff, for many of the airplanes that we use.
But in your report, you mentioned that you did a survey and there were some airplanes that were ready for it. And the federal government says we have to have unleaded fuel in aviation by 2018.
I will defer to airport staff on that. Michael, would you? I'm going to turn it over to Michael Wentworth. He's a deputy director that's in charge of admin and the airports, and he is more of an expert than I am.
Good morning. Through the President, Supervisor Groom, to answer your question, I'm sorry, I got confused. Could you ask your question again?
That will the new fuel farm include unleaded fuel? And I read someplace that by 2018, the federal government expected aviation to have unleaded fuel.
Yes, thank you. By 2018, the FAA will have a committee that will make a recommendation to certify a fuel that takes it to the next process, but that won't happen until 2018. There won't be a certified fuel at 2018. We'll just begin that process. The unleaded fuel committee that the FAA has convened will review and have currently gone out to bid or to request from the industry fuels that would be viable as an unleaded fuel. So that's still a work in progress.
Well, let me ask you then, if it's not until way beyond 2018, why was the EPA out here doing all this monitoring just this last year?
The way this was explained to the airport when they first put the monitors there, the EPA, through the Bay Area Air Quality Management District, placed the monitors on the field to perform lead studies in the air. One of the last sources of lead in our atmosphere is coming from aviation fuel. And so they wanted to understand what the impact of this lead would be. And to that, they placed 2 monitors co-located on one of our neighbors' properties and began to assess what the levels of lead were. As a result of that, in January of this year, they came back to the airport and said, you had some higher levels, and we began working with Bay Area Air Quality Management District, the EPA, and the FAA, and our neighbors to see what the airport could do in that regard. So we met with the current fuel provider, Rabbit Aviation, who is here this morning, to have a discussion about possibly bringing unleaded fuel earlier than the certified fuel would be available, just to be proactive. And so to that, a proposal was given, and I'm not sure where that is today, but I'm sure they could speak to that when they will speak later.
Thank you.
Supervisor Tessier?
I just had a question. the concessionaire that we're looking to give the lease to, Mountain West Aviation, what level of due diligence did we do? And the reason I'm asking this question, I have an article here that says that the Solano County Board of Supervisors just terminated their contract because of two things: required proof of insurance wasn't provided, and that certain improvements to the county-owned hangar and office building were not done to the county's satisfaction. So there's sort of a little reservation I have when I read something like that that just happened this recently.
I think we should ask real property and the airport's manager to speak to the RFI process. And I believe Mountain West is here this morning, and they could probably best address your concerns about Solano County.
Okay, I would like to hear from them, because that concerns me. If
Michael, we'll let you speak later, but real property?
Thank you, Board. When we performed the RFI, we gathered certain information about all the companies that responded, including financial statements and information about their operations. At the time, we brought those potential candidates out to the airport to interview them and to gather more information. Mountain West was actually proactive in explaining some of the events that had taken place at the time at the airport up in Solano County. And there were other issues that were being resolved, including Solano County actually taking over the fueling operation, and there was an agreement that was provided to us that explained that process and that these violations were not directly related to them leaving the airport. At that time, we also reached out to Solano County and spoke to the airport manager and some of the staff there who had nothing but high regard for Mountain West Aviation and the services that they provided. And we reached out to other airports that they provide services at and received similar responses. That, in addition to the financial statements and some of the information they had provided to us as part of their proposal package, made us feel very comfortable with them as a future provider.
Did you talk with any of the supervisors' offices to find out why they voted to terminate it? I mean, they're getting high marks. I would think that they wouldn't want to terminate unless maybe the county wanted to get the income themselves. And I'd like to know a little bit more about why they would have done that. That's a big step.
We'd probably have to gather some of that information for you and get back to you. I can't speak specifically to all that information. I do not believe we spoke to the Board of Supervisors at the time.
Can I ask a question then? Is there a sort of a drop dead date or a real time frame that we have to make this approval? I mean, I'd like to know a little bit more about that background before I'd make this decision. Do we still have time for our next July meeting to have had some due diligence through the Board of Supervisors?
I think the airport can speak to the drop dead dates in relation to the fuel farm. As far as the lease goes, it's just a matter of moving forward and getting them up and running. But I don't believe there's a drop dead date associated with approving the lease and the concession agreement.
Okay, maybe if someone could let us know if this piece could be continued if need be to get that additional background information. I don't want to shut them down. They may be doing absolutely fine. There may be something completely separate that the board's seeing that we're not seeing. But when I see that, it makes me a little uncomfortable.
Yes. Do you want to?
Gretchen, did you want to?
Good morning. Actually, I was shown documents from Solano County. They bought Mount West Aviation out at the Nut Tree Airport and wanted to provide the fuel themselves. So there was a confidentiality agreement, so we didn't share those documents with the board, but I did see them personally and speak with the former airport manager of the Nut Tree Airport. And Solano County chose to take over the fueling themselves at the Nut Tree Airport. So we're very comfortable moving forward into an agreement with Mountain West Aviation. And as far as the $2.3 million grant that we're going to receive from the Federal Aviation Administration, originally the drop dead date was July 15th for that grant. We may be able to push it to the end of the month, but no further than that. And the FAA has made it very clear that this is, due to budget cuts, we will receive the grant this year, but not in any future years.
But I'm sorry, that speaks to item 63, though. That's the construction, not the 19. Okay.
Okay. I assume it mentioned in here that it was the, I don't know, you'd call it fiscal year or the I'd have to find my notes here. If it's possible, I mean, I realize our next meeting is until July 23rd. I would only be willing to give a conditional approval without having the information from the board themselves. I mean, I'd just like to know if they bought them out because it's a bit better for the county, but if they bought them out because they're unsatisfied with their performance, that's a different situation to me. So I'd like us to, if we need to go forward today with the conditional, with the caveat that we get that information, if it isn't positive, that it would have to come back on the 23rd. So I'm just, you know, if that's.
I think they're two separate issues. 19 has to do with the contract with Mountain West.
That's the one I'm talking about.
I know, but 63 has to do with the construction.
Okay.
And they are separate.
Yes, they are separate.
Okay.
So this one doesn't have a time frame. The other one does. I get that. So I would like to make a request that we bring this particular item back at our next board meeting with the idea that there would be some additional research with the board to see if they're willing to talk about why specifically. I mean, I'm reading what it says in the newspaper. Believe me, I don't believe everything I read in the newspaper, surprisingly.
Not.
But I also really just want to make sure. I mean, they sound really good, but when I read that, it makes me nervous. Yes? Oop.
Mr. President, I would also, I also want to go back to the unleaded fuel. I want some stipulation in this agreement that unleaded fuel will have a priority in its placement. Now I have a press release from the Department of Transportation that says the FAA is asking fuel producers to submit by July 1, 2014, data packages for candidate replacement unleaded fuel formations for evaluations by the FAA. So if they want that by July of 1 year from now, I think unleaded fuel is coming faster than perhaps we think. So that's a very important thing to me in our airports, is to have unleaded fuel available.
Can I ask, Gretchen Kelly is the airport manager. Can you speak to that issue?
Yeah, there is room in the new fuel facility for unleaded fuel.
A moment ago, I was told it was up to the provider.
Well, it is. When we spoke with Rabbit Aviation, because of our longstanding relationship with them, we offered them first choice of place in the new fuel facility, and Rabbit Aviation chose the larger of the two spaces so that they could add a third tank to provide unleaded fuel. And we did tell them that we would offer a reduced flowage rate to incentivize the sale of unleaded fuel.
Okay.
Thank you for that, but could add is not will add, and it's not still firm in my mind that whatever agreement we accept will have a stipulation that unleaded fuel must be placed as soon as possible. That's what I'm asking for, Mr. President.
Okay, Supervisor Pine?
A couple of questions about the unleaded fuel as well. So based on this EPA report, I guess back in 2008, they thought that there was speculation that we might be at 0.53 tons per year. And then this recent testing suggested 0.33, where the standard is 0.15. But you had reservations or concerns about the accuracy of the testing or the placement of the monitors.
Yes.
And can you talk a little bit about that? And are we expecting to get new readings? When we're going to get, are we going to get new readings?
Yes, of the 17 airports that have monitors in the country, our monitors are the closest to where the aircraft do their engine run-ups before takeoff. We're at 25 feet from the monitors where the aircraft, exhaust is, and other airports are 200, 300, 400 feet. So, I mean, although we are certainly concerned about the lead in the air, we think that our readings were high because of the placement of the monitors. In response to an FAA request on a separate issue, because the air traffic control tower doesn't have line of sight with the aircraft in the run-up area, we have moved the run-up area about 240 feet north. And Bay Area Air Quality Management expects new results. It takes about 4 weeks. And so we're right at about the 4-week point.
So any day on that?
Yeah, we expect results, and we expect them to be significantly lower.
And if we did have unleaded, I know there's no this sort of a future universal fuel is going to be a while in development, but much of the literature says that some of the planes can take, I guess, existing unleaded. I mean, off the top of your head, how many, what percentage of the planes could take that if we had it today?
Based on the survey that we did recently, about 12% of our fleet, and that's between both airports, both Half Moon Bay and San Carlos. And those are the aircraft that are right now bringing, automotive gas and putting it into their aircraft, which we allow, engines that can handle the unleaded fuel. We allow tenants to bring, automotive gas and put
How
it
do they
into
do that? They actually
5-gallon,
they bring it
cans
in a tank?
Yeah.
Oh,
So those are the ones that responded to the survey and said that they would purchase unleaded fuel if we provided it at the airport.
Okay. And then finally, Today, don't we have, I think I learned that one of our tanks, we have some so-called split tanks. I mean, wouldn't,
The tank that Rabbit owns currently and the tank that we will move with FAA grant funds is a split tank. And so that will be relocated at no cost to Rabbit to the new fuel facility. The airport and the FAA will pay for that. So there will be one split tank in the new fuel facility, and then
I wonder if that might facilitate the unleaded in that at this time, we have demand for 10-15%. Maybe a split tank is all we need right now.
that was our thinking. And then there is room, for a third tank if Rabbit chooses to
And
install
obviously, we'll need more.
Just a quick question.
Is that a promise? No, go ahead.
Just very quick. I'm not sure I caught the answer to Supervisor Groom's inquiry about the could part of the unleaded fuel issue.
Yeah, I mean, the airport's very supportive of unleaded fuel, so, we're happy to, include that, right, in agreements in the future, yeah. Now, so the FAA grant will only pay to move the existing fuel tank into the new fuel facility, and then the fuel providers will be responsible for adding additional tanks. The grant funding only covers that one tank and the fuel facility. So there is room for fuel providers to add tanks, whether it holds unleaded Jet A or the 100 low lead aviation fuel.
I have a bunch of speakers, and I did tell Mr. Terry Androlini I would give him 5 minutes. I think you had some PowerPoint too that you wanted to show, or maybe not. Okay, do you want to? Okay. Yeah.
I'll share my 5 minutes in my 5 minutes. I'll share it with
Mr. DeMeo or? Okay.
I have a quick. Good morning, distinguished members, Board of Supervisors, County Manager Maltby, Assistant County Manager Holland, County Council Beers. Nice to see you all. Yes, I'm here, Terry Androlini representing Rapid Aviation Services and Dan DeMeo, and they're going to be speaking here in a minute, and Wei Chu is going to give you a PowerPoint. But to address what Supervisor Groom just said, this matter should be deferred to at least the next meeting as far as this lease is concerned. There's no rush for it whatsoever. In fact, there's no fuel tank for the next 6 months. So it seems like this lease with West Aviation really needs to be put off because there's more due diligence that needs to be done. I just heard about this lease a week ago. And you have not put out an RFP as far as the tank usage are concerned. I understand they've been looking for people to take the office space. But as far as the tank usage is concerned, there has been, as far as I know, no RFP. It should be put out for bid. But beyond that, if you look at the documents that they ask this vendor to sign, in Exhibit D, it's actually totally contrary to what I just heard. It says in Exhibit D, D1, page D1, it reads, the tenant must make accommodations for the storage and distribution of both avgas and jet fuel. Avgas is a leaded gas. Now, they must do that. It doesn't sound to me as though they have the option. This is a lease that's going to go on for 10 years and plus 3 5-year options. This is definitely contrary to public policy right now with the EPA and Congress saying you need to work towards unleaded fuel. So this particular lease should be sent back to the workshop because it doesn't cover what I think we've just been talking about, which is the option or the ability to install unleaded fuel very soon, if not sooner. The other thing is, and I don't know if you received it, but I got an email from the spokesperson for Friends of the Earth, Marcy Keever, who came out and sent you guys emails objecting to this rush to get this thing through and wanting to come in here and speak to it because it's not good policy to be putting out a 10-year lease for leaded fuels. And as well as environmentalist Pete McCluskey sent out another email that I saw saying, please defer this. It's not good public policy. Congress has written a piece saying it's not good public policy. So I just can't understand what the rush would be to put this vendor out there and create this issue, which needs to be carefully addressed and reviewed. So I hope that you can put it over for at least the next meeting so that we can vet this out. Plus, we've been trying to meet with Mr. Wentworth and his staff to talk about this, and we've been unable to do so. So this is, to me, there's no reason to rush it, and let's all have a fair chance to review this. Thank you. And I'd like to call on Mr. Chu to Wei Chu to give a little economic presentation, and then Mr. DeMeo.
Good morning, members of the board and county executive staff. My name is Wei Chu, and I am a principal at Newell Advisors, which is a management consulting and advisory firm based in Palo Alto. I was retained by Rabbit Aviation on the advice of Terry Andolini to look at some of the economic issues about fuel provision and the operations at San Carlos Airport. San Mateo County has a seminal opportunity here today to act as an environmental steward. By becoming among the very first California airports to mandate the use and sale of unleaded gas, avgas, the board would directly address the recent lead emission findings of the EPA and FAA at San Carlos Airport, and that decision would constitute a win-win both for the health of the community and the economic welfare of the airport. My task in working with Terry and Dan DeMeo was to try to put the operations of the airport in a larger macroeconomic context. So what are the issues? There's a general aviation market, which many people don't realize is absolutely in decline. The decline is coming about because of a number of issues. This chart represents the last 20 years, 30 years of aviation history. The red line represents general aviation operations in the United States. And the two red columns represent major economic recessions. The blue line represents the US GDP. And contrary to all of the economic welfare in the United States, the general aviation industry, and I'm talking about small planes, not the commercial industry, is declining. And it's impacted by major international events like 9/11, as well as the economic issues.
I'm not going to do another 5 minutes. Could you set it at 3 minutes? Could you? And I'm sorry, did you fill out one of these slips?
I did.
And you are?
Wei Chu.
Okay. So we'll give you another 3 minutes if you, Mr. Chu.
Thank you. This graph represents the price sensitivity of the pilot community to the cost of fuel. And at every dollar marking, there is an increase in the number of pilots who will refuse to fly anymore because of the cost of fuel. This slide represents aircraft shipments from 1960 to 2010. And because of insurance and liability issues, the delivery of small aircraft has actually plummeted. And it only has rebounded slightly because of President Clinton's General Aviation Reinvestment Act back in the mid-1990s. Finally, the pilot cohort is diminishing. Pilots are aging, aircraft are aging, and there are not youngsters coming back into the market to replenish the pilots who are moving out of the industry. The orange and green graphs in this slide represent the pilot cohort that is retiring, and it's not increasing back with economic recovery. The downward trend in operations across the industry have absolutely impacted all of the airports in the Bay Area. And this slide represents the operations at all Bay Area airports, including San Carlos, which is the dark blue line. The only one that seems to be recovering is the red line, which is Palo Alto. Everybody else is on a downward trend. So, what is going on here? Despite the decline in the volume of operations, I looked at Rabbit Aviation's operations, and they have created a fuel per operation metric, which is exemplary. In this slide, the tall blue lines represent operations at the airport. The purple line represents the flowage revenue that is coming to the county from those operations and from the fuel sold for those operations. The dotted black line represents the increase in operations and fuel coming to, and revenue coming to the county. And the purple line shows an uptick despite the recession from from 2008 to 2010. I believe that customers are coming back to San Carlos to fuel their planes for a simple reason. The price of fuel is cheap, cheaper than the neighboring airports. This is the graph of 100 low lead fuel prices. This is a graph of jet fuel. And I believe that pilots vote with their wings. They can fly anywhere to get fuel. In a survey of 17 airports in a 45-mile radius around San Carlos, there were 13 airports that had single sole providers
Can you
of
just
fuel.
summarize your
Yes.
point then? Thank you.
So today I would ask that the board resolve to mandate the sale of unleaded fuels at San Carlos Airport, solicit proposals from fuel vendors of unleaded fuel by an open RFP process, and consider the indexing of future fuel prices to a basket of regional fuel prices to ensure true market competition.
Thank you. Okay, next is Dan DeMayo, followed by Wes Lukasik.
Good morning, supervisors and county staff. My name is Dan DeMayo, and I own and operate Rabbit Aviation Services at the San Carlos Airport. I've been the sole supplier of fuel at the airport for over 9 years. I value my customers greatly, and I've talked to them about issues affecting general aviation, and I feel that it's my responsibility to keep their best interest in mind. One topic that has been coming up for years is when will the industry switch to unleaded fuel? I would like to think that it would have been sooner than allowing the EPA to set up lead monitoring equipment at our airport and find out that we now have a lead problem. Well, thinking about the EPA's findings and the FAA's recommendation to mitigate lead at our airport, that there would have been an RFP issued for an unleaded supplier. To the best of my knowledge, no RFP was ever issued for the 2 available spaces in the new fuel facility. And I, as well as the majority of aviation gasoline users at San Carlos Airport, believe that is a mistake. And I think it's time for San Mateo County to take a proactive approach towards mitigating lead in our environment by making room for an unleaded aviation fuel supplier. And I'm asking you today to take action. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Dan. Wes Lukasik, followed by Kevin Caher.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen of the board. My name is Wes, and I'm a pilot, and I'm an aircraft owner based at San Carlos Airport. After renting airplanes at San Carlos for a number of years, a couple of years ago, I decided that I wanted to get my own airplane. And I was faced with a choice. Within the budget constraints that I had, I could buy an old gas guzzler, or I could buy a new, modern, efficient airplane. Well, in view of all the emphasis on reducing our CO2 footprint and the EPA mandate to get rid of lead from gasoline, I made the decision to buy this light sport aircraft. Its engine is very efficient, burns about half the fuel of the popular Cessna airplanes, and it was designed to run on unleaded gas. So I made the decision to buy that. The problem is that I can't get unleaded gas. Everybody talks about it, nobody seems to be doing anything about it. And the net effect of this decision that I made, which I thought was a responsible, progressive decision, is that I'm paying, in effect, about 60% more for the fuel that I'm using as a result of the increased maintenance requirements that are imposed on me by the engine manufacturers because I'm burning this polluting leaded gasoline. So I guess I've made my, what I thought was progressive and future-looking decision, and I think that maybe you now have an opportunity to do likewise by requiring that that unleaded gasoline be available at San Carlos. I think it'll be good for the environment, good for the airport, in line with the EPA mandates, and it will encourage us who do like to behave in a socially progressive way.
Thank you, Mr. Lukasik.
To continue.
Kevin Kerr. Okay, Kevin Kerr, followed by Phil Sill.
Thank you. My name is Kevin Kerr. I've lived in San Mateo County for 55 years. I'm a captain for a major airline. I'm also a licensed FAA mechanic and a certified flight instructor. I have 2 hangars, one at San Carlos and one at Hayward. And I have 3 airplanes, 2 of which right now I can burn unleaded autogas. I have, when I can find that gas, I can burn those airplanes. My 3rd airplane, the larger airplane, is capable of burning unleaded gas, according to the EAA, Experimental Aircraft Association, and Peterson, that provides these STCs. But I can't seem to find it anywhere. So I'm urging the board to allow, it's very progressive, it's very difficult to find it, but I would love to see the usage, the sale of unleaded gas at San Carlos. Out there, there's a bunch of green posters. Do what you can for the environment, such and such. I drive a electric Nissan Leaf, so a lot of pilots, especially airline pilots, aren't considered to be too environmentally sound. But that's not necessarily true. And I would love the opportunity to burn unleaded autogas in my car. And also, as a side note, I could fly anywhere with these 3 airplanes to get gas. I'm always coming home to San Carlos to buy gas because it's been the cheapest, basically, in the Bay Area. Thank you.
Thank you. And now it's Ryan Kerr, your son. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. Okay. Well, why don't Ryan, you go next, and you can be last.
All right, guys. Thank you. I'm more, I'm not as concerned about the environment as my father. Just put that out there. But no, I'm more interested in my pocketbook, and I definitely go to San Carlos for my cheaper fuel. Anywhere else is, 20 to 30 cents more. And over time, that adds up to quite a bit. And I know that there's not really all that much flowage at San Carlos for 2 providers. All of a sudden, if you have 2 providers in San Carlos trying to split up the amount of fuel that there is, inevitably the fuel is going to have to go up per gallon, which is going to make it cost prohibitive for a lot of people to fly. So I just wanted to put that out.
Just a kind of a question.
Sure.
Why would having 2 people potentially compete raise the price?
Okay, absolutely. So if you have all your fixed assets there that you have to pay for, all of a sudden you're going to have to split up. Then you're going to have to raise the cost of fuel in order to pay for all those assets. And there's only a finite amount of fuel that's being sold at San Carlos, and I really don't see that going up significantly with 2 people competing.
Okay.
Any other questions?
No.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. And now Phil Sill. Did I call it before?
President Horsley and the board, county management, thank you for letting me speak today. My name is Phil C., and I'm a pilot that uses San Carlos Airport in the furtherance of my business. First and foremost, I would like to request that you not add a second vendor of leaded aviation gasoline. Adding another leaded fuel supplier does nothing to help mitigate our lead problem. It blocks the solution by taking the space that otherwise might be used to bring unleaded fuel to San Carlos. You may have heard that the FAA is working on an unleaded replacement for leaded aviation gas. While this is true, this effort is expected to take a decade or more. With the threat of an EPA endangerment finding creating the potential for airport closure, we cannot wait that long. We must mitigate our lead emissions now using all available resources, including unleaded fuel, and that which is available. Second, I would request you give strong consideration to the economic impact of any change in vendors at the airport. You may have heard from other sources that adding a second leaded avgas vendor would result in lower prices through competition. Nothing could be farther from the truth. To see this, look at nearby Palo Alto and Reed Hillview airports. They have multiple vendors and have had higher prices than San Carlos for aviation gasoline since 2005 when I started using it. I track prices all the time, and I go to San Carlos and I base there because of this, in part. To close, I respectfully request that the board, 1, require any new vendor of fuel at San Carlos Airport to supply unleaded aviation gasoline of 91 octane or higher. 2. Reserve space for storage of unleaded gasoline. And 3. Involve actual stakeholders in the decision-making process for the addition of any fuel vendor or any other change that will have significant economic impact now and in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Michael Golden from Mountain West, you can have 5 minutes, or dead. Oh, okay.
Honorable President Horsley, honorable members of the Board of Supervisors and staff, Michael Golden, on behalf of Mountain West Aviation, thank you very much for having me here today. I'd like to address an unfortunately negative comment I heard from the Board of Supervisors. Ms. Tissier, I believe I pronounced that correctly. Please don't believe everything you read in the newspaper. You will not be able to be satisfied by contacting the Solano County Board of Supervisors. We entered into a confidentiality agreement with them. It was their desire to buy back our leasehold at that airport. We've provided county staff and President Horsley with irrefutable evidence indicating that we received consideration, valuable consideration, from that county. We did not have any sort of a default. We provided county staff with evidence of such. I want to make that very clear. So if you have any questions about that, now would be a good time. Our proposal to San Mateo County Airports has been one in the making for many years. We've worked through your staff, 3 airport managers, and we're proposing providing services not presently at San Carlos Airport, but selling fuel is part of what we do, without question. I should also note that at no time did we ever say that we wouldn't sell unleaded aviation fuel. At present, 30% of the aircraft in the fleet use 70% of the fuel and cannot use an unleaded option because there is no unleaded option available. At any time when one becomes available, we'd be happy to sell it, provided it was viable and it's approved by the FAA. At Lake Tahoe Airport, where we operate, we had a 2,500-gallon tank that we stored and dispensed 91 octane fuel that could be used in certain aircraft that were approved for unleaded aviation use. We were doing it for 6 years. We had to have the fuel be free of ethanol, so we had to special order it. Couldn't have any ethanol in it because ethanol is corrosive to aircraft engines and fuel systems. We did that. Last year, we sold less than 600 gallons of this fuel. That was the 6th year we did it, and it is not economically viable. The customer doesn't want to pay more than what they would pay from their corner gas station when they can bring in 2 5-gallon containers in their car and load up their aircraft. That, in essence, is the problem. Let me be very clear, though. We are more than happy to dispense an unleaded option as soon as an unleaded aviation fuel becomes available. Nothing in the equipment that we're proposing investing in and installing at San Carlos Airport would prohibit us from selling an unleaded aviation fuel. The real crux of the matter is such a product is not available on the market today for all the aircraft. That's really what it boils down to. And we don't know when it will become available. I'm an affected aircraft owner. My aircraft will not run on any unleaded aircraft fuel. I want to talk to you a little bit about us. Hopefully you've done a little research on us. We're part of a national network of FBOs, and our plan at San Carlos Airport is to bring much needed services to the community that is not there today. On behalf of Rabbit Aviation, let me state that I'm a customer. I think that they do a very good job with what they do. We have a very different business model. Would there be competition? Absolutely. I've never seen the consumer lose from competition. Some of the things that we do, a little different than others, we get heavily involved in our communities. We're a participant and sponsorship of the EAA Young Eagles program, where our company sponsors voluntary flights to kids, many of them in need, many of them handicapped, many of them disabled, to expose them to aviation. I just flew 10 kids over the weekend with a company sponsorship on our behalf. We flew 100 at a particular event. We expose them to this. We think it's a good thing to do, and we dedicate a large portion of our profits to kick back into the community through aviation resources. Some of the services that we plan on providing, this airport needs tremendously. I've been a patron of San Carlos Airport for decades, flying in and out, using the airport, visiting the airport, eating at the Sky Kitchen, and I can tell you firsthand as a customer, the services we plan on providing just are not there. Thank you for your time.
Okay.
Question?
Do you want
Yeah, a question on the economic viability of the unleaded gas. We heard from the airport manager that about 15% of our aircraft could use it today. So are you saying that that's not enough to have a split tank or some?
It's not the 15% that use it, and let me be very clear to this, and all the pilots in the room should absolutely listen to what I have to say here. It's really important because we've tried this before, and we just ceased doing it. The issue is that those 15% are running off of smaller, more fuel-efficient engines. They take less fuel. They're not the heavy fuel burners, okay? As a result, for example, my aircraft holds 52 gallons. It cannot run on anything less than 100 octane fuel. Right now, the only 100 octane fuel available is 100 low lead. A Rotax engine in an LSA aircraft burns less than half the fuel burn I do. Their fuel capacity is lower, the amount of fuel they use is less, the range of the aircraft is less. Thereby, it's the equivalent of comparing a Honda Accord to a Cadillac Escalade in fuel burn. You don't have the scale of economic activity for unleaded fuel. It's not there. It could be 15% of the fleet, but that 15% of the fleet may only be using 3% of the fuel, just because of the nature of the aircraft it's going into.
Yes, Adrian?
Yes, Mr. Golden.
Yes.
I appreciate the fact that you're willing to answer these questions. I agree, I don't always believe everything I read, but let me ask you a question, because this says it was according to a county report. I have not seen the county report. It mentions a couple things. It said you didn't provide proof of insurance coverage. Is that correct?
That is incorrect, and I would defer that to county staff because I was not made aware of this article until this item came on San Mateo County Board of Supervisors' agenda. I didn't even know it existed. Our company didn't know it existed. We were kind of blindsided by it. We provided county staff, and they can vouch for it, with our evidence of insurance for that location that ran from June 29th, 2012 through June 28th, 2013. However, during that time frame, we were working on a lease buyout by the county, Solano County, to buy out our operations. And I want to make it very clear. We did not own our equipment there. We were leasing the fuel system from the county. It was theirs. I don't know what their decision-making process was. It's none of my concern. They provided us with valuable consideration, the amount of which I cannot divulge to you, and they will not divulge to you, due to confidentiality that was entered into in writing between myself, our company, and their legal counsel. But the evidence of insurance, your county staff has, and that actually can be made public record.
Okay, let me ask you the second question. The second comment was made that said that there were certain improvements to the county-owned hangar and office building that were not done to the county's satisfaction.
That is categorically incorrect. We could provide you with building permits, records, receipts, etc. It was done years ago.
And had you ever gotten any correspondence from the county saying they weren't happy with what you've done?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we did. They weren't happy with the color of paint we chose to paint the building, even though they didn't have any approval right.
And did you provide any of this information to our staff? Any of the comments that the County of Solano had made to you?
We provided them with the documentation that showed exactly what occurred when they bought out our lease. So I guess the answer would be yes.
Okay.
Any other questions I can answer for you?
Nope.
Okay, if one other speaker is Dev Sharma.
Good morning. My name is Dev Sharma, and I'm with Epic Aviation, national fuel supplier, marketing aviation fuel, jet, and avgas in the U.S. and the Canada market. So I just wanted to share with you my relationship with Michael Golden or Mountain West. And we partner with our FBOs, not just share, not just trade a commodity, whether it's jet or avgas or both products. We provide other services such as risk management, whether it's training, card processing, and insurance. So there's a level of partnership that we build with our FBOs throughout the U.S. and Canada, and again, all to support our aviation community, whether they're pilots or they're passengers or the airport. And again, that's part of the training and the risk management. We've been partnered for 7 years at the other two airports. We've had a great relationship with no issues, no customer complaints. We share the customer base, whether it's fractional companies or end users, because we have over 4,000 cardholders or contract fuel customers. So we do, get feedback from customers from time to time. But we've had zero complaints on Mountain West, their level of service, and so, and then the other item is, no credit issues as well. So strong businessman, strong financials, and strong partner of Epic Aviation. And a couple other comments I also want to make. I know there's other comments been made. The FAA is soliciting the major oil refiners. I've been with Epic Aviation for 17 years, and I was with BP for 10 years. So I had some inside information from the major refiners where their R&D department are developing the replacement tube for avgas. In fact, BP in the Europe market has a UL product, which is unleaded, for the aviation avgas customers. And the product will come out. It's, again, has to be approved by FAA. It can be marketed today. I did have a customer in Arlington, Washington, who had the product about the same volume. About 13% or 15% of the volume was unleaded. But again, the economics did not support the unleaded product, just simply because of the cost. So that's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any other questions?
I do have a question.
Yes, Adrian?
This might be for Michael Wentworth or for Jim Porter, because this is something I wasn't aware of early on. If we don't add the competition piece into this, it says here that we stand to lose the airport grant that we're getting. Is that correct?
Yes, Grant Assurance 23 through the President, Supervisor Tissier. We stand to lose the $2.3 million grant because of Grant Assurance 23 that stipulates that you may not give an exclusive use of the airport to anyone providing an aviation-related service. And this would fall into that category.
Even if you went out in a competitive bid and people bid on this situation, we'd have to make sure we had two vendors in order to keep this grant or to get this grant? Because if we went out in competition to see who would provide fuel for us, and if we put that provision of unleaded or whatnot, and we got some bids back, we'd have to take the two top bids?
Correct.
Okay. Otherwise, we lose the 2.3.
Correct.
I had a follow-up question on that too.
Wait, do you have another question?
No, I just want to make sure I'm reading this correctly.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know if this is an area where I want to be sure that County Council has carefully assessed it. I actually got a copy of the grant language, and it's not clear to me that the scenario that Supervisor Tissier suggested would be prohibited. That what it speaks to is you can't grant exclusive rights, and if you gave a vendor a term, but that's not necessarily exclusivity. They say, for example, you can't give a vendor rights to renew because that turns into exclusive. If 5 can be flipped into 10 and then into 15. So I would think it's important for council to really look at this Assurance 23 if you haven't had a chance to.
Yeah, I would agree. Both the issue of leaded versus unleaded, and now this issue is just coming to my attention. So to the extent the the board is interested in a contract that has a legal requirement for unleaded gas, for example, then I would knowing this board and how you think and how diligent you are, I would suggest, putting this over, assuming there's no immediate jeopardy, so that our office can look at the legal landscape and provide you with that objective information. And then also that some of the practical issues, legal landscape aside, can be objectively looked at. Is the fuel available? Will people buy it? And you've heard from certain vendors here, and people who are here have interests and points of view. But I knowing this board, and if that is an interest of yours, looking at an unleaded requirement in the contract, then I think perhaps more work can be done from my office in conjunction with Michael and Jim to really take a real diligent, strong look at some of the issues that you're contending with today.
Can I make another comment? I think that'd be helpful if we, and I don't know from a timing standpoint, if we can put both of them off to our next meeting. That would be preferable, just because, one, I appreciate Mr. Golden's response to me. It sounds like he's talked to our staff, but I haven't talked to our staff. This came to my attention over the weekend, this article. I'd like to have that opportunity to talk to staff a little bit more about what's taken place and their due diligence. And I appreciate the confidentiality, I get that, but I'd like to have further discussion with our staff on this. And then two, I am concerned about the grant assurance 23, but I'd like to understand if it's interpreted the way my colleague says, since he is an attorney and I am not, and whether or not there's any wiggle room there at all. Just would want to know that before we make a final decision.
The other thing that I would, knowing Supervisor Tissier, this is kind of an important line of inquiry for you. Take a look at whatever's publicly available, helping your staff do that at a Solano. I mean, there is a strong presumption that any agreement that has a county pay out money to a vendor as a settlement or otherwise would be a public document. Now, are there exceptions to the Public Records Act where, sure. And is it possible there's an exception that applies here? Maybe. But I think there's a strong presumption that any agreement reached between Mountain West and a county would be a public document. Again, not knowing the situation. But
and it says according to a county report. I don't know if, again, I'm reading from a newspaper article. So I just like to see some of that information before I make a final decision.
Mr. Porter, did you have something to add?
Through the president, I agree with Mr. Byers. I think the lease certainly is something that's not time sensitive. If we can address the next item, the construction contract, that is the item that is time sensitive related to the grant, and I can explain the scope of work and how there is separation between the lease agreement and what this construction contract is. So perhaps when you get a little more information on the other item, you can make a decision on that as well.
I don't think I understand. You're saying that you would like us to act on item 63, the construction now? Or
of course. What I'm saying is if we take item 63 separately, I can explain the scope of work of the construction contract and how it is separate from the lease agreement from Mountain West, and then your board can make a decision as to whether you'd like to act or not.
Well, I guess the question I have, whether we want to act or not, if we were to wait till July 23rd to act, is that going to be a problem? Do we lose the grant?
63.
We would be in jeopardy of losing the grant. There's a possibility we wouldn't, but it would be a risk to us.
I guess the question, maybe the second piece to that is, if we were to approve this for the grant, for the timing, and wanted additional information, I guess it puts us in kind of a difficult spot. It's unfortunate that it comes to us now when we don't have enough time. It made some mention here about July is the, where was it? It said something about July being the, the two, let's see.
Well, let me make...
Okay, they talked about extended past, due to FAA budget cuts, the grant will not be extended past the fiscal year 2013 grant cycle. When does that grant cycle end? Is it July 31st? Is it July 10th?
So the information from the FAA that was provided us was July 15th.
July 15th.
Now, there can be discussions with the FAA to see if they could continue that to the 23rd. There will be a risk, but we can certainly have that discussion if it's the will of the board to continue this item to the 23rd.
Let me suggest that we do one thing, that we take item number 19 and put that over until the next board meeting, until such time as the other information that Supervisor Tessier and other board members have talked about. So we put that over, and then take a look again at item 63 separately.
And is item 63 dependent upon approval of 19?
It is not.
It is not. It's completely separate. It's a construction.
That is correct.
Essentially.
Just a question on 63.
Go ahead.
Given our interest in the unleaded fuel, either right away or in the relatively near term, is there anything in the construction that needs to be considered to accommodate that? In other words, whatever the plans are, the plans that you've put in place and that presumably we're approving now, if it turns out a year from now where it's the right time to bring in unleaded, will this construction accommodate that?
So through the president, yes, it will. So the intent of this project is twofold. One is to relocate the existing fuel farm outside of a safety area, and the other portion of this project is to upgrade our eastern pump station, which pumps stormwater out of the field. So when we relocate Rabbit Aviation's tanks, it's going to be on a larger site, and it will not preclude the addition of unleaded fuel at a later date. Mountain West contract, which is the earlier agreement, they would be responsible for installing equipment, not us. This contract simply relocates the existing facilities to a new location and deals with the pump station. So it's totally separate from any lease agreement with Mountain West.
So, go ahead.
Could you, it is related to me. I found the page in the memo from the FAA that says, as a solution to the problem of lead content in avgas, the FAA has been actively working with the aviation industry and the EPA to develop an unleaded fuel replacement by 2018.
Okay.
So that's only 4.5 years. So if we do this construction, will there be room to put tanks for unleaded fuel?
Yes, the construction that we're doing does not preclude the addition of additional tanks on this location. Now, there's ways to put in tanks. I mean, there's different ways to put those tanks in. But the understanding of our staff is that the square footage that's allotted can provide for 2 carriers with up to 4 tanks. Is that correct? Yes.
Any other questions?
Are we comfortable with at least considering passing item 63?
Well, I certainly don't want to lose the grant. That's a real concern I have. Obviously, if we don't do it today and the FAA says no, we can't extend it to the end of the month or the 23rd, then we stand to lose $2.3 million. That's not satisfactory. I mean, I would be comfortable in the sense that what I heard from County Council is that the comments that my colleague made, where you may not be able to continue to renew it, but you might be able to get an exclusive, and I don't even know if that's what we really want to do, but I'm just saying, if we think that the grant assurance 23 is unclear enough that we're not making a decision here that's going to hurt us in the long run, let's put it that way, and not give us a little bit more flexibility. I certainly don't want to lose the $2.3 million. So if it has to be done today, I would make the motion to do that construction piece. Yeah. But I'd also want some clarification in the meantime, even between now and the 23rd, on that FAA grant assurance.
I'll second that motion.
One just quick comment to give you perhaps some more solace. If you were to enter into if the concern was doing nothing to jeopardize the grant, because that's sort of up in the air. If you wait until the 23rd, that's an up in the air piece that will require some agreement or goodwill by the FAA, which is unknown. If you were to enter into the contract, approve this item number 63 today, which is an approval for Disney Construction to start construction, there is a 30-day without cause termination provision. So that could always be executed. I mean, it's not an ideal for anyone to have to execute, to exercise that option, but that is an option.
Okay, so there's a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Okay, 63.
No.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No.
Okay, 1 no and 4 ayes. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that's, we'll go on to item number 20 now.
Mr. President, members of the board, before you are 2 items having to do with the Workforce Investment Board that are required for certification under the changes in the Workforce Investment Act through SB 698. And that is a strategic plan that meets the state criteria and an agreement that spells out the relationship between the Workforce Investment Board and the Board of Supervisors to ensure that we're delivering meaningful programs that benefit eligible residents and private employers. The Workforce Investment Board has been working on that strategic plan for over a year, working with many groups within the county, partnerships, businesses, and have done a really exceptional job at putting together a plan that is at the strategic level right now and needs to have built out an action plan with the arrival of our new director next Monday. That's before you right now to be approved so that we can submit to the state to be certified, hopefully, as a high-performing WIB. And I'm happy to answer any questions on it.
Yes.
I just had a quick question. I did look in the back here on some of your whereases. One of the things I was concerned about, but I think it addresses it in item number 11. You outlined in the front where you have performance measures, you mentioned 5 different areas. One of the areas we had talked about recently is these apprenticeships between the building trades, community college, and things like that. But it looks as if there's still the ability to sort of add some other involvement by different groups, including business, education, labor, government, and public agency in the WIB. So it doesn't preclude us from, if we see something working well, I think there's some legislation going on right now around that. So it doesn't preclude us from adding to it.
No, definitely not. Actually, those are the 5 sectors that are really the large sectors that will focus strategies around, but that doesn't preclude building out our apprenticeship with the trade industry. As a matter of fact, some of the critical projects, and more along the line of another area that you've had interest in, which is our economic development program. We're right now meeting on pulling together a workshop this fall that'll bring together the chambers, business, and the cities to really talk about how we build on those partnerships and put together the training programs that we're working with the school districts and industry on, and build out that plan. The plan is a broad plan right now for the next 2 years, so we need very specific actions that we need to build out by January.
Thank you.
And that'll definitely involve that. And labor was here earlier, but I see they left that we've been working with.
I think that's an excellent point about the trades. They do have apprenticeship programs that are pretty extensive. I was kind of surprised at how much actual education, math and the ability to read that they require. Supervisor Pine, did you have questions as well?
Yes, I'll just ask a couple. I can talk to Mr. Holland more offline, but can you just briefly summarize kind of the funding available for the implementation of this plan? How much and where is it from?
In a very broad sense. Right now, of course, we're going through a rather difficult time with the sequestering. So over the next, over this first quarter, and hopefully the federal folks will move that along and we won't go into a second round of sequestering. Going through this first quarter, the funding is very difficult. It's reduced about 40%. But I'm going to answer it in a little broader sense. In general, we've had 3 to 4 million that come through a number of federal and state grants.
That's the annual amount.
Pardon me?
About 4 million annually.
And the piece that is more exciting is bringing on a new director that has a track record of, for a much smaller WIB, bringing in up to 18 to 20 million through private funding and federal and state funding. So we're looking to expand that. Most of the funding comes through grants. So we'll be looking at the programs. The more traditional programs have been through dislocated workers, youth programs, rapid response to business. So there are federal and state grant programs that we can build our funding from, and then there are private programs. And I might add, in addressing one about training that Supervisor Horsley, Supervisor Tissier were talking about, we have two major efforts going on now. We have a $2.5 million Allies grant program, and that's looking at across 3 Broad County areas and 3 WIBs, Nova and Back to the Future, the Santa Clara County WIB, putting together a joint English learning program where we're all providing the same training, and that's a partnership with the school districts. We were one of 5 that got that grant federally, and that'll be going on over the next 2 years to look at a better way to provide English learning skills. That's an example of where that'll additional funding comes in.
I also wanted to ask you about the performance measures in the memo. There were 2 stated. One was to increase the clients served by 25%. And again, I don't have a sense of scale there as to how many we serve today. And then the second one was, build programs to address these skill gaps in the key priority sectors and train in place workers. And the number was 250, which I know it's just kind of, I don't know if that's an annual number or it would seem like a low number if it's for the whole period. So if you could comment on those objectives.
Yeah, I'll answer that very candidly. The data that we've, there are a number of ways I collect data, and on how successful these programs have been in the past, it's not a very robust system, and it's not a very trackable system. So we're looking at strengthening in that. When we say we'll increase by 25%, the change in the Workforce Investment Act going into 2014, along with other areas like the CARE Act, is requiring us to put 25% more of the money on the ground in training programs, not salaries and other things. So it's a very increased effort in looking at our training. And if we did the trackable numbers, and without getting down in the weeds about how that happens, we really only track people that sign up. That is not everybody that comes through the door, and we need to change that model to tracking all of those that come through the door, and then their success as they go through training programs. Okay,
and then my last question in the MOU between the county and the WIB, it states that the board of supervisors will approve the actual budget for the WIB. I guess that will happen in the budget process. That's fair to say.
Yes.
Okay.
Goes both through the WIB board, obviously, and then comes in here.
Okay. I can talk to you more about it offline. Thank you.
Do I make a motion to approve it?
I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. And now we have to go back up to item number 4, and I see all of our management analysts here. And just to accept the Distinguished Budget and Presentation Award for 2012-13 from the Government Finance Officers Association. And we are all extremely proud of the work that all of you do. And Mr. Maltby?
Mr. President, first of all, I could tell you that Mr. Sacco has been counting the lost hours of productivity of his staff while sitting here.
I know.
And he's going to make them make that up
I just made him sit through all this.
They're gonna ask for extra pay. 'Cause they gotta sit through this.
You thought you were gonna get out quick, but
I'm pleased to join with the board in recognizing the outstanding work of our budget office in receiving the Distinguished Budget Presentation Award from the Government Finance Officers Association for fiscal year 12-13. We're one of only 9 counties in the state to receive this award. We've received it numerous times in the past. And as the board is aware, in order to receive the award, an organization's budget document must be rated by independent reviewers as proficient in serving as a policy document, financial plan, operations guide, and communications device. Our office over the years has made many improvements in the budget process. Some of you may remember the 2 telephone books that we used to deliver that represented the budget. It's less than half that size now. It's online. We print very few copies. It's available to the public well in advance of the board hearings. And we anticipate with the improvements being made in the 2-year budget and performance cycle, increasing transparency in publishing the budget through our open data portal starting this year. I want to take the opportunity to recognize our team who are in the audience, led by Jim Sacco, our county budget director, and with him are Michael Bolander, Shanna Collins, Dina Haskell, and Danielle Lee. They have done yeoman's work this time of year and throughout the year, but you can't walk over to the 500 building anytime from about March through when the budget is actually delivered to the board in September on weekends and nights and not find them working. Mr. Sacco has agreed to allow them to eat occasionally, but that's the only concession he's made to modern personnel management. Mike, congratulations to all of them for a job well done.
yeah. Okay.
Maybe give him 5 minutes off for good behavior today, a little extra bonus. Jim, you run a tough ship.
Yeah.
Thank you all.
And congratulations too. As
Thank
well.
you.
Okay, go on to board members' reports. Supervisor, none? Supervisor Pine?
I had the opportunity to take a great tour with Kellex, is it Nelson, of our resource conservation district efforts, and was incredibly impressed. I had no idea. And she only receives, or the agency only receives $50,000 of tax money, and they somehow get numerous grants and bring people in as they have the money. But we went to a number of specific sites where they're doing water improvement and doing some interesting things with soils and agriculture. And anyway, she's definitely a force of nature. I mean, we have a couple of those around the county. I mean, she's kind of in the Debbie Bazan category,
Yeah.
So
Pretty special.
it was really, really impressive.
Supervisor Slocum?
No report, thank you.
Supervisor Tessier?
Yes, I do have several adjourned memories. The first one is for Alvin Schwarzbach. He died on June 12th, 2013, at the age of 87. He's the beloved husband of Denise Schwarzbach for 55 years, a loving father of Leslie, Karen, and David, and the grandfather of 6 grandchildren. He was born in Chicago, and after serving as an officer in the United States Navy, he went to Purdue in Indiana, where he graduated with a degree in civil engineering. He moved with his family moved to California with his family in 1959 and was in the real estate industry. He was very well respected in our community. He was an active member of the Daly City community, serving as president of the Jefferson Elementary School District Board. He participated on several local bond committees. He was a recipient of the Silver Beaver Award, the Boy Scout of America's highest honor, and also worked on many fundraising efforts for the Girl Scouts of America, and was a generous contributor to numerous Jewish organizations and charities. He will be sorely missed in our community. Next adjourning memory is for Virginia Nessier. She was passed away on June 14th. She was born in Little Falls, Minnesota, and grew up in St. Paul. She graduated from the University of Minnesota in 1944, but she and some of her friends took a train to Los Angeles just to see the palm trees, spent the summer in Lake Tahoe, and then moved to San Francisco, where she met her husband Rod. They were married in 1947 and had 3 children, Chris, Michelle, and Steve. She worked for San Francisco State University Student Health Services for 27 years. She was a very good friend of our family, and our sympathies go out to her and or to her family. Also, I'd like to adjourn in memory of Jim Wadstrup. He was a longtime Caltrain locomotive engineer who died on June 19th, right before he was to leave the Diridon station at 7:50 a.m. So our sympathies go out to his family and friends. It was a very sad day for Caltrain. And the last adjourn in memory is for Sister M. Claire Maher. She was my 8th grade teacher at Our Lady of Mercy, and I kept her on her toes. Always a hilarious one. But anyway, she passed away just recently, and I just saw this in Sunday's paper when I got home, and she was a terrific teacher. She expected a lot from you, was very, very patient, and and she will be sorely missed. She was, I believe, 100, I forget, she was 105, 106 years old when she passed away, if I'm reading this correctly. 105, she had just achieved her 105th birthday. So
Fabulous.
our
Great.
sympathies go out to, she was a Dominican nun.
Marty, I will give you time to speak as well, but and also adjourn in memory of a longtime ranger, one of our county rangers, Bob Breen of Montara. And over his 41 years of active involvement in Fitzgerald, Breen came to be regarded as the spot's master naturalist and the foremost advocate for its protection. He died of a heart attack on Wednesday at the age of 73. Among his many contributions, Breen founded the Friends of Fitzgerald Marine Reserve and the Junior Rangers and Naturalist programs and the Marine Science program at Half Moon Bay High School. He was an absolute true naturalist, said Tom Ciotti, who is the president of Friends of Fitzgerald. Bob was instrumental in making Fitzgerald what it is today. He was hired in 1969, just months after Fitzgerald was protected as a reserve. He was tasked with protecting this stretch of tide pools and rocky reefs, which had been a prime fishing spot for generations. He has work cut out for him. In his first year, he recorded more than 800 incidents of visitors poaching crab, abalone, and other sea life for food or souvenirs. He worked to re-educate visitors about the habitat, but when necessary, he also called law enforcement. Some people retaliated against these restrictions. During the initial years at the Fitzgerald Reserve, vandals shattered a public toilet, tore shingles off the ranger station, lit a bonfire at the beach. At one point, someone even firebombed a public restroom. But Bob Breen became an able repairman over these years, fixing all of those items. He kept a meticulous record of the various marine species, leading him to conclude the area benefited from a biodiversity rarely matched in the state. He was known as a soft-spoken man who loved leading thousands of visitors on tours of the area. Starting in 1972, he began training docents under the auspices of the Coyote Point Museum, something he continued every year since then. He actually had a class even in late January. Retired in 2004 after 35 years of working as a naturalist, surprised others by using his retirement to go back to school to study for a second master's degree. I'd also like to adjourn in memory of the 2 teenagers who perished in the recent tragic plane crash in SFO. And just the deputy who used to provide our security has a serious injury, and he's in the hospital, I think, at SF General. And so I want to also, my thoughts and prayers are with John Flahaven and his family. And he was assigned to countywide security for a long time, and I hadn't seen him lately and was distressed to hear about his recent troubles. In any case, Martin Fox.
Thank you very much, President Percy, members of the board. My remarks on 3B, prevention and early intervention. To summarize, the good news is that BHRS, HSA, probation, and the County Office of Education are recommending expansion of outpatient mental health services looks like former students up to age 29. If you take a look on page 4 of the memorandum under the measure column, you will see that those are the plans. The bad news is that once a mentally ill child goes over the age 18 cliff, there is no behavioral situation that could encourage that mentally ill child to participate in treatment, whether you call it Laura's Law or anything else. That's the missing piece here. And Los Angeles County has replicated this particular program, and there was just an article about it several months ago, and they admitted that they miss the people who turn 18 who have resistance to mental health treatment. So the evidence is already in. Can we do something to fill that crack? Thank you for your service to the residents of San Mateo County. Jeff Galvez grew up in San Bruno, graduated from Mills High School, and attended Skyline College before joining the Marines and serving 2 tours of duty in Iraq. Jeff is a 33-year-old head of a family who has 2 small children, and he was working as a police officer for the city of Richmond when he was told it will no longer pay his health insurance premiums. That insurance is needed to fund the chemotherapy he needs to recover from cancer. Please join Everything South City, American Legion Post 409, Coastside Military Moms, and the Marine Corps League for a pasta feed fundraiser at 757 San Mateo Avenue in San Bruno on July 14th from 4 to 7 p.m. VetCom 2013 is being held at the Concord Hilton Hotel in Concord on Monday, July 15th from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. and will focus on employment, education, and VA benefits. Sponsors include AmVets of California, Blue Star Moms, East Bay Stand Down, Honoring the Path of the Warrior, Sentinels of Freedom, Vietnam Veterans of Diablo Valley, and the Wounded Warrior Project. Please adjourn in memory of those who died since the board's last meeting as the result of untreated serious mental illness. They include the 30-year-old man from Oregon, Jeffrey Griffin Boyce, who is being held in the Marin County Jail on suspicion of murdering a woman from Castro Valley when he committed suicide. The 71-year-old and 68-year-old parents, Joe and Edith Henderson of Aptos, who were keeping their son, their 40-year-old son, who is on probation and has mental illness, at the time that he assaulted and killed them last Sunday. And the unidentified 21-year-old man in Oakland who was under arrest last night when he died.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now go into closed session. We'll now reconvene in open session. Mr. Byers, can you report on the actions in closed session?
Yes, thank you, President Horsley. There are 2 items on the agenda listed for closed session, items A and B. A was is the conference with legal counsel existing litigation, the San Mateo County Investment Pool versus Fold, pending litigation matter. And the second item is an anticipated litigation item. That second item, B, was not taken up by the board, but item A was, and there was no action taken on that item.
Thank you. The board will now adjourn.